My name is Michelle, and I work in an office. I'm 31 years old, and my husband John is 33. We actually met through a friend's introduction, and now we've been married for 2 years. When I was growing up, I was pretty sheltered, being an only child. I went to a regular public school until middle school, but then I switched to an all-girls private school until college. You know how it is with all-girls schools. There's a lot of admiration among friends, but I never really thought about dating guys seriously. Sure, I went out with a couple of guys in my early 20s, but nothing really clicked for marriage. I always figured I'd meet someone eventually, but time flew by, and suddenly I was in my 30s. My parents started getting worried, especially my dad. He started suggesting I meet some guys he found on matchmaking websites, and one of those guys turned out to be John, my husband now. After we met a few times, John told me he had feelings for me. He's a really kind person who respects his parents a lot. I'm the same way, so I felt like we shared important values. That's why I decided to marry him. Our wedding was organized pretty quickly, and our families and friends were all there to support us. I was thrilled and hoped that our happiness would last forever. But not long after we got married, John's dad got sick and passed away. John started spending a lot of time taking care of his mom, which is totally understandable. He's always visiting her and even goes on trips with her. While he still cares about me, it sometimes feels like his mom comes first in everything. It's a bit frustrating, but other than that, things are okay. I guess this is just how marriage is, so I've learned to accept it and make compromises. Lately, I've been finding a lot of happiness in entering sweepstakes and winning prizes. It's been mostly little things like makeup and snacks. But then I hit the jackpot, a pair of tickets to Miami. I couldn't believe it when I got the call. It was the first time I ever won something so big. But then came the tough part, deciding who to take. John had just gone on a trip with his mom, and he usually pays for his own travels. So I thought, why not give this amazing opportunity to my parents? I hurried over to their house and shared the news. Guess what? I won a trip to Miami. Why don't you two go? My mom was ecstatic, saying it had been ages since they'd gone on a trip abroad. However, my dad didn't seem as excited about the trip. I've got work commitments, Michelle, he explained. But you still have some paid leave left, don't you? I countered. True, but this is a busy season for our industry, especially for me as the department head. Taking time off isn't easy. My mom then suggested, Michelle, if you can manage to get leave, why don't you and I go? I thought about it and agreed. You're right, Mom. It's too good of an opportunity to miss. Since my dad couldn't make it, I decided to ask my boss for time off the next day. Thankfully, work was slow, and I got permission without any trouble. After work, I swung by a bookstore at the station to pick up a guidebook on Miami, filled with excitement for the trip. As I neared home, I noticed the lights were already on. John must have gotten back home already, I realized. I better hurry up with dinner, I thought to myself. As I opened the door, instead of John's shoes, I spotted a pair of women's shoes I recognized. Michelle, what's the meaning of leaving the house empty at this hour? Scolded my mother-in-law. Oh, I didn't know you were here, I responded. It doesn't matter if I'm here or not. It's time for John to be home, and you should be preparing dinner and getting things ready for him, she lectured. Living nearby, she has a spare key, courtesy of John. I understand she feels lonely since her husband passed away, but her unexpected visits and presumptions of entitlement don't sit well with me. Plus, she holds onto old-fashioned beliefs about a wife's role, and she's not a fan of me working. Every time we cross paths, she finds something to criticize or make snide remarks about, which makes it difficult for me to warm up to her. Why the long face and the detour instead of coming straight home? She continued, You're such a useless wife. Let me see what you bought, my mother-in-law demanded. Please stop, I objected, but she ignored me and grabbed the bag containing the guidebook. What's all this? What do you plan to do in Miami? How extravagant, she exclaimed. No, it's a prize I won. I'm giving it as a gift to my parents, I explained. Well, nobody told me about this, she retorted. Just as we were arguing, John walked in. I'm back. What's going on? He asked. Welcome home, John. Michelle won a trip to Miami, my mother-in-law informed him. How thoughtless of you to give it to Michelle's parents without discussing it first. I would have loved to go, John said. I didn't know about the trip to Miami either. I was thinking of giving it to my parents, I responded. How many people can go on this trip? John inquired. It's for 2 people, I replied. You should have told me beforehand. I would have loved to go too. Why are you making decisions on your own? John questioned. I thought about going with just the 2 of us. But this time, I wanted to give it to my parents, I explained. You're mistaken. This time Mom and I are going and you're staying home, John declared firmly, cutting off my protests. No way. I won this. I'm going to give it as a gift to my parents, I insisted. We can plan something else another time, right? Mom really wants to go, so please try to understand, I pleaded. What are you even saying? You just went on a trip with your mom not long ago. Why can't I use my own money to go on a trip? Anyway, this time Mom and I are going. If you don't like it, we can get a divorce, John declared, dropping the word like a bombshell. The mention of divorce from my husband, used as a threat, made me feel a sudden wave of detachment towards him. Fine, do as you please, I responded, deciding to step back. My husband and mother-in-law, oblivious to my internal turmoil, seemed pleased with themselves. You should have been more understanding from the start, they chided. Ignoring their smug remarks, I began to consider my next steps to address the situation. The following day, I sought counsel from my parents, sharing the ordeal with them. My mom, who had been excited about the trip, seemed disappointed, but she understood the situation. I understand. If that's how it is, we can't help it. It's better to avoid any tension between you two, so don't worry, she reassured me. Feeling guilty about letting her down, I decided to make things right. During my lunch break, I called the airline and requested to change the trip to Miami to include my husband and mother-in-law instead. However, the operator explained that once the reservation is made, changes aren't allowed, and the tickets are only valid for the winner. This was clearly stated in the documents they sent me. Realizing my mistake, I told the operator I would decline the prize. I chose not to tell my husband and the others about this and decided that if they really wanted to go, they could purchase tickets themselves. That evening, when my husband came home from work, he brought up the trip. Hey Michelle, did you call the airline? Did you tell them we're going to Miami with Mom? He asked. I made the call and handed over the winning documents and tickets to my husband. Here, take a look at these. All the details are in there. It's important to read them, I urged. Knowing he probably wouldn't bother reading them, I handed them over anyway. True to form, he just glanced at them and set them on his shelf. Try to see this as a kind gesture for your mom, I suggested. Sure, I'm more than happy to stay home. I can't wait to see their reactions, he agreed. On the day of the trip, John seemed unusually tense, as if something was weighing heavily on him. As the departure day arrived, John and his mother encountered delays at the airport. What's going on? Can you explain this? He demanded, looking at me with confusion and frustration. As we've explained, these tickets are non-transferable, and if the winner isn't present, they become invalid. This is clearly outlined in our policy. Anyone else attempting to use them would need to pay the full fare, the airline representative reiterated. John and his mother had already splurged on luxury hotels, stretching their budget thin. Then, at the airport ticket counter, they encountered yet another setback. I'm terribly sorry, but there seems to be an issue. Could you please try using a different payment method? The attendant requested. That's impossible. This card has been working perfectly fine. Why is this happening now? John exclaimed in frustration. I'm afraid we can't diagnose the problem here. You may want to contact your card issuer for assistance, the attendant advised. With no other option, John had to resort to using another credit card and then reach out to me. Hey, what's happening? The tickets you gave us aren't usable, and now my credit card's been declined, he explained over the phone. Did you bother reading the fine print on the ticket? It clearly states they're invalid if the winner isn't present. And as for your credit card issue, that's news to me, I retorted. Not your card, John clarified. Well, I've reported my card lost. I couldn't find it in my wallet, so I suspected you might have taken it. Thankfully, it hasn't been misused, I explained. That's not amusing. You won't get away with this when we're back, John threatened. That's entirely your own doing. What you did amounts to theft, I countered. You know what, woman? I'm divorcing you. Get out, John declared angrily. Fine. Just as I expected you'd say. As you wish. I'll agree to the divorce, I replied calmly. Truth be told, I had already planned to leave for my parents' house before John told me to go. I had already packed my bags. using the paid leave I had taken for this trip. As I left the house, I made sure to take the passbook and seal so he couldn't access our savings. I also informed the neighbors that we would be getting divorced. Upon reviewing our savings for potential division in the event of a divorce, I discovered that the funds had been depleted multiple times. I had no recollection of making these withdrawals, indicating that John was responsible. Further investigation, comparing the withdrawal dates with my daily blog entries, revealed that the money was withdrawn during the period when John and my mother-in-law were on vacation. I confided in my parents about John's proposition for divorce, his unauthorized use of my credit card, and his utilization of our joint savings for the trip with my mother-in-law. As I recounted the situation, my parents' expressions shifted from concern to sternness. "I can't believe John would stoop to such deceit. I'm deeply sorry, it's my fault for arranging your marriage," my dad apologized, bowing his head in shame. His anger towards John was evident. "This falls on my shoulders. Leave it to me," he assured me, taking responsibility. In reality, my dad held a high-ranking position at the parent company of John's employer and occasionally conducted audits. Despite another colleague being originally assigned, my dad rearranged his schedule at short notice to personally audit John's company. During the audit, he invited John's superior, an executive at the subsidiary, for a meal. Given the hierarchical structure, John's superior was visibly anxious, attempting to curry favor with my dad while struggling with nerves. During the meal, my dad took the opportunity to inform John's superior about my situation. "In fact, my daughter is going through a divorce. It appears that the main issues stemmed from her husband's excessive dependence on his mother. If it were just that, I might have advised her to persevere, but it seems he also misused my daughter's credit card and depleted her savings without her consent. Under such circumstances, I couldn't in good conscience recommend reconciliation. By the way, your subordinate, or rather, former son-in-law, I suppose, is John. How has his performance been lately?" my dad inquired. "It's a busy time, but I haven't seen him much around the office," John's superior responded. Upon learning about my impending divorce from my dad, John's superior sensed trouble and decided to look into the matter further. John, being the son-in-law of the parent company's director, was well known within the company and received some preferential treatment. However, a closer examination might reveal more about his conduct. "I'll arrange for a lawyer recommended by my dad to handle the divorce proceedings. You'll receive written confirmation soon, covering matters like alimony and property division," I informed John. John assured me that he wouldn't let things slide, but it seemed that neither he nor his mother would have an easy time upon their return from Miami. Sometime after John and my mother-in-law returned from their trip to Miami, John paid a visit to my parents' house. "Michelle, what's this certified mail about? I'm strapped for cash. I can't afford to pay any alimony, and this property division, it's just a marital spat. There's no need to take it this far. I've apologized, so please come back," John pleaded. "What are you saying? Have you even read the contents of the certified mail? Your mother's constant mental abuse, not to mention depleting our savings and attempting to use my credit card without permission. There's no way we can reconcile, right?" I countered. "Please, don't say that. Since you left, it's been difficult for both Mom and me. Have you been receiving icy stares from the neighbors, or have there been issues at work?" John inquired, his demeanor stiffening. "I suppose I hit the nail on the head," I remarked. "How did you?" "Well, who knows? What do you think the reason might be?" "If you reflect on your actions, you might understand," I replied. "I can't reconcile with you, and you'll have to face the consequences. Prepare yourself. Also, please communicate through the attorney from now on. If you persist in lingering, I'll involve the security company," John warned sternly. When I mentioned involving the security company, John finally relented and left with a heavy heart. In truth, everything John had come pleading about was orchestrated by my father and me. Before returning to my parents' home, I went to our neighbors and spun a tale about being kicked out by my husband and mother-in-law after they stole the plane tickets I had won in a lottery. Drawing from my past experience in the drama club during my student years, my performance was remarkably convincing. Since my husband and mother-in-law returned from their Miami trip, rumors and gossip have swirled around them in the neighborhood. My mother-in-law was mortified to learn from a local busybody that she was being shunned because of rumors like, "You took your daughter-in-law's winning travel tickets and threw her out, didn't you?" But now, it's your turn to hear the full story. Following this incident, my father initiated an investigation at my husband's workplace. It was discovered that my husband, who happened to be the son-in-law of a department head in the parent company, had been abusing his position. He frequently took time off during busy periods to travel with his mother-in-law, habitually arrived late or left early, and was even found to be embezzling company funds. Given the severity of his actions, he was promptly dismissed from his job. The company then issued a statement to all its employees, declaring an end to the preferential treatment previously extended to family members of senior staff. Thanks to the lawyer my father hired, my divorce proceedings unfolded smoothly, and I finally obtained my official single status. The savings my husband had depleted were divided evenly based on their original amounts before his spending spree, and I received fair compensation. My detailed blog entries served as evidence of his emotional abuse, validating my experiences. Feeling liberated after getting justice against my husband and mother-in-law, I didn't want to hoard the compensation from the divorce. Instead, I decided to indulge and treat myself. Coordinating with my father's company holiday, I planned a vacation, seizing the opportunity to embark on the overseas trip I had previously missed out on. Initially undecided on our destination, we eventually settled on Miami, taking into account my mother's preferences. Together with my parents, we meticulously planned our itinerary, anticipating days filled with exploring crystal-clear seas, vibrant coral reefs, indulging in shopping, and relishing our long-overdue family vacation. Recognizing the sorrow I had caused my parents through my divorce, I was determined to make amends and create lasting memories with them. While thoughts of remarriage were far from my mind at the moment, I remained open to the possibility of finding genuine companionship in the future. Uncertain about what lies ahead, I focused on the excitement of our upcoming trip with my parents, cherishing the present happiness and looking forward to whatever the future may bring.
She's playing the role of a poor wife who lost her beloved husband. But this devil neglects my son who's battling an illness to lavish trips and money on her lover. At my late husband's funeral, while I was giving the chief mourner's speech, my mother-in-law suddenly snatched the microphone from me and screamed something outrageous. The atmosphere immediately became weird, and whispers started leaking out. I saw it with my own eyes. She was bringing a man into the house while her son was hospitalized. The worst. A woman like you doesn't belong here. Get out of this place. My mother-in-law's claim was something I had no memory of. I'm not adept enough to date several men at once, and not to boast. But I'm not the type who gets much attention either. Understood. I don't intend to stay after being told that. But before I go, could you please look at this? I showed a sheet of printouts to my mother-in-law. Having seen it, she firmly stated this man was my affair partner. However, there was something else shown on that paper. Seeing it, my mother-in-law completely changed her attitude and confronted someone, saying, "You've embarrassed me." Then, the funeral home started to fill with an even stranger atmosphere. And it was no longer about the funeral. As a result, the family's shame was completely exposed. Now in my 40s, I met the ideal man in my 20s and married him. It felt like falling in love at first sight, and it was a marriage after a grand romance. Having lost my parents at a young age, I always longed for a household with both parents. I grew up with a strong desire and longing to pour endless love onto my child, which I never received from my parents. The process of turning this longing into reality through marriage with my husband was truly blissful, and I only wished for this happiness to last forever. Although my husband was raised with both parents, his mother had been through 3 divorces, and he seems to have deep-seated bitter memories of being tossed around by those experiences. He often talked about his view of marriage, wishing never to put his children through such bitter experiences. If he were to have a family, we were both starved for the ideal of a happy family. My husband was a very considerate person, never doing to others what he disliked himself. Blessed with a daughter and a son, I braced myself for the chaos of parenting and housework. However, no matter how busy he was with work, he never used it as an excuse to neglect housework or parenting. He always said that housework was a respectable job. Despite minor problems common in any household, we could laugh them off and forgive each other immediately, enjoying a seemingly perfect happiness. But the presence of my mother-in-law and sister-in-law cast a dark shadow. My mother-in-law would call without any significant reason, droning on with sarcasm and nagging. Once, while I was cooking and tried to end the call, I received an unexpected large bill. She had shopped online using my name without my knowledge, and I received a dunning letter for unpaid bills. That time, my husband stepped in, and it ended with my mother-in-law paying the bills herself. But I deeply realized she was a person who would harass me terribly if displeased. From then on, I always took calls from my mother-in-law, no matter how busy I was. Taking advantage of this, she would drone on with her sarcasm. Can you even raise children, not knowing your own mother? Oh, that's right, you can't be considerate because you don't know your mother. Mother's Day has long passed. Though she is a mother-in-law, mother is in the title. So it's common sense to celebrate her grandly on Mother's Day. I asked my mother-in-law in advance if there was anything she wanted, and she said she wanted an easy-to-carry bag like those used for shopping nearby. I searched for some options online and let her choose and buy one herself. However, according to her, that was not the point. It was important to celebrate her grandly. That day, my children celebrated me because it was Mother's Day. I too am a mother. I wanted to retort but was afraid of her backlash, so I remained silent. My sister-in-law often comes to our house without prior notice, but always accompanied by my mother-in-law. Both are troublesome enough on their own, but together they wear me down. Incidentally, my sister-in-law and husband have different fathers. My sister-in-law has children, but they are younger and still need a lot of care. Yet she seems to leave them somewhere else when she comes to our house. I've seen her children only a handful of times, despite the number of times I've seen her. Whenever she comes, she rummages through the house, asking for things she likes. This isn't a fancy ham. There are two, so one should be fine, right? There's also wine. Lucky. She envies the good food I eat and rummages around the kitchen, packing long-lasting items in her bag without asking. Since I don't know when they'll suddenly come, I've developed a habit of hiding expensive items, especially during seasons of gift-giving like the mid-year and year-end gifts. They attack knowing this. By the way, your child was wearing new clothes, right? I want them because they're like new, so don't let them wear it too much. Children grow quickly, and I often buy new clothes even if it's not for a special occasion. My sister-in-law checks my children's appearances, noting the colors, sizes, and brands, and then asks for those clothes. When my children were younger, my sister-in-law's month-old baby liked my daughter's toy and asked for it. At 1 month old, a baby can hardly grasp toys properly, but when my daughter refused, my sister-in-law forcefully took it. She then made her baby hold the toy, which was clearly too early for him, and pretended to be happy, saying, "Isn't that nice?" Right after, my daughter burst into tears, and it was tough to calm her down. This is why it's troublesome when someone who doesn't know their mother becomes one. You're the mother, so stop your daughter from crying quickly. If you can't, I'll tape her mouth shut. I was furious, thinking whose fault it was. Furthermore, to tape her mouth shut? Despite being a mother herself, my sister-in-law's nerve to say such a thing was terrifying. Later, my husband sternly scolded my sister-in-law, and the situation settled down. But my daughter became wary of her. As these incidents accumulated, we both reached our 40s. Times have changed, and the regular health checkups at my husband's workplace have been replaced by more thorough medical checkups. This change reflects society's custom of preferring detailed symptoms for early detection and treatment. My husband and I are always cautious about our health. We balance our meals and modify dishes to make disliked ingredients more palatable. Thanks to this, my family has no picky eaters, and every meal is completely eaten. We also make sure to exercise moderately. We actively participate in light exercise gatherings organized by the local community, and are members of a public gym, attending whenever we have time. Though there were suggestions to hire a personal trainer at the gym for better results, we chose not to pursue physical beauty. Probably, my husband's prudent and serious nature unconsciously influenced this decision. I would be happy if my husband maintained a youthful body even as he aged. So I thought investing in that was acceptable. Such a husband had never needed a re-examination in past health screenings. He was confident that the results would remain the same even after transitioning to a more thorough medical checkup. However, contrary to expectations, he required a re-examination. My husband had said re-examinations were just minor discrepancies, and told me not to worry, remaining positive even after undergoing it. However, the detailed examination results shattered my imagination more easily than I had expected. He was diagnosed with lung cancer. The doctor told us that my husband's cancer was treatable. Even if it wasn't curable, many people live normal lives while maintaining the status quo, which was encouraging. My husband positively received the doctor's words and aimed for a complete recovery first and foremost. Later, as treatment methods changed due to things like medication incompatibilities, not aiming for a complete cure but rather delaying the progression became an option. And the doctor explained what could happen in a worst-case scenario, making us think of him as a conscientious doctor. My husband, trusting the doctor's words, began treatment, but during the process, further new facts came to light. We thought it was just lung cancer, but it turned out to be a metastasis from pancreatic cancer. The pancreas is often called a silent organ because early detection of cancer there is difficult. The lung cancer found during the re-examination of the medical checkup had already shown a shadow on the pancreas at that time. However, it was viewed as independent cancers. A detailed investigation revealed it was lung cancer due to metastasis from pancreatic cancer, and by then, the pancreatic aspect had already progressed, narrowing the options. My husband was still in his 40s and physically strong, so surgery was viable and he underwent it. However, after consulting, it turned out the progression was beyond our expectations, and surgery was abandoned. When we received the life expectancy prognosis, the time to part with my husband through death would inevitably come. But I had not imagined it would be so soon. I envisioned us both with completely white hair, bent backs, poor vision, walking slowly, yet still walking hand in hand. I thought of death as something that would come eventually beyond that. The word despair surfaced in my mind, and I became unsure of how to live moving forward. However, my husband felt differently. Encouraged by stories Of people living longer than their prognosis, he strongly wanted to live, prioritizing a peaceful life. I made efforts to fulfill his wish to return home whenever he desired. He went in and out of the hospital, extending his life by a few months. But a year later, my husband passed away. It felt somewhat consoling that he died in his sleep without the pain of cancer. During my husband's illness, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law did not come to visit. They also refused to contribute to the funeral expenses, deciding unilaterally that no condolence money was necessary because we were family. I paid for all the funeral expenses myself. Gradually, I had come to terms with the fact that my husband would be gone soon after the prognosis. However, when the time actually came, I felt like I was falling apart. Our children were still in their teens and not of age to be independent. From now on, I must raise our children alone. I must be strong. I continued to stand by sheer willpower and also took on the role of the chief mourner. Ironically, being busy as the chief mourner might have been a distraction for the better. Otherwise, I might have spent the entire day clinging to my husband's corpse and crying. My husband continued to work as much as possible even after the cancer was discovered, with his company accommodating him by reducing his workload with half-day shifts and remote work. Both my husband and I are nothing but grateful to his company. At the funeral, not only his colleagues but also those he had worked with long ago came to mourn from afar. It was truly helpful emotionally that his subordinates took the initiative to offer their help. From my side, my uncle and his wife came to support me. After losing my parents, my uncle, who was my mother's brother and single at that time, became my guardian and raised me. I accidentally heard much later that his marriage had been postponed because he took me in after my mother died. My uncle's wife must have been very anxious about becoming a parent figure to me as soon as they married. However, my uncle and aunt never treated me as an outsider and raised me with all their love, making sure I did not feel pitiable for losing my parents. This did not change even after I married and had a family. My uncle and aunt were always by my side, comforting me on every occasion. Danny, my husband's biological father, also came. Due to the divorce, my husband had been separated from Danny, but they had kept in touch regularly, as Danny had come to our wedding. Danny was good to our children, his grandchildren, and they were fond of him. Danny hugged the children and said, "It's tough to lose a father so young." With mixed feelings. My son must have been deeply regretful to leave his children behind. How I wish I could replace him, an old man like me. After apologizing to the remains for not being able to do anything for his son and acknowledging himself as a worthless father, Danny turned to the children and pushed them to support me. The funeral proceeded solemnly, with only the chanting of the monk and the sound of subdued crying resonating around. After the funeral ended, the chief mourner's speech and guidance from the funeral director were announced. I deeply bowed to the mourners who had attended up to that point, then expressed my thanks and greetings. Continuing, I conveyed further words of gratitude on behalf of my late husband to those he had interacted with during his lifetime, talking about how I met my husband and the future he had aimed for. I empathized and spoke on his behalf about how regrettable and difficult it must have been to leave midway through his endeavors. Although I wanted to give the speech without crying, it was impossible, and I struggled to squeeze out the words. However, even as I persevered with my husband's thoughts and gratitude, I noticed a shadow approaching from the corner of my eye. Everyone was dressed in mourning clothes and bowing their heads, so at that moment, I couldn't tell who had stood up. However, feeling a presence beside me and looking over, I saw my mother-in-law standing with an incredible expression. And she snatched the microphone from me. This is the place for the mother of the son. Outsiders should step back. Before I could even think what, my mother-in-law pushed me hard. I nearly lost my balance but was supported by the funeral home staff and managed not to fall. Ignoring my state, my mother-in-law exclaimed, just playing the role of a wife devastated by the loss of her beloved husband. This vile person should no longer be entrusted with the funeral. My mother-in-law claimed it was hard for her to suppress her laughter watching me play the tragic wife. This woman did nothing but cheat while her son endured a painful illness. It's this demon wife's fault my son died before achieving his dreams. She declared that I left all the housework and parenting to my husband and spent his earnings on affairs with other men. She explained that the stress I continuously caused him not only led to his developing an ulcer but also prevented him from seeking treatment when the ulcer was at an initial stage, leading to stomach cancer. And ultimately, he lost his life to stomach cancer. I was left holding my head after hearing my mother-in-law's words. There were too many points to argue, I didn't know where to start. Just before, during the chief mourner's speech, I had been moved to tears. But this sudden turn of events left me emotionally overwhelmed. Actually, my mother-in-law couldn't believe my husband's cancer and had tried to make the attending physician explain the condition directly. However, even if it's a family member, without the patient's consent, the physician refused to explain the condition outright. At that time, the physician had contacted me saying, "Your mother-in-law seems to think your husband had stomach cancer, not pancreatic cancer." She had not listened to us well, arbitrarily changed the information in her mind, and replaced her memories with the wrong facts as if they were true. Because she never visited during my husband's hospitalization, the misinformation was never corrected. A cold-blooded adulterous wife has no place here. This is not a place for a woman like you. Just leave. Understood. I don't intend to stay after being told that much. However, there's one thing I would like everyone to see. I showed a sheet of printer paper. It was one of the results from an investigation I had requested from a detective agency. I handed one copy to my mother-in-law and distributed several more copies to the mourners present. Printed on the paper were images of a man and a woman being intimate, along with the investigation results. The woman in the images was my sister-in-law, and the man was someone I did not recognize. You're stupid. Showing your own evidence of cheating like that. This man, he's not your affair partner, is he? My mother-in-law either didn't realize that the woman in the photos was my sister-in-law or pretended not to notice, and she concluded that the man was my affair partner. However, these investigation results are evidence of my sister-in-law's infidelity at the scene and detail her affairs. My sister-in-law is obsessed with playing at nightclubs, and this man she is being intimate with is her favorite worker. She seems to have invested a considerable amount, but all that money is just stakes. And it doesn't count as revenue for the worker unless my sister-in-law pays. If my sister-in-law continues not to pay, the worker will have to cover it himself and will only suffer losses. Therefore, the worker tried to get my sister-in-law to pay somehow, but he couldn't get a reassuring answer from her. Nor did he feel any intention from her to pay, since there was no other way but to exploit my sister-in-law's weaknesses and press her hard. I followed her and witnessed her entering our house. The worker, thinking if my sister-in-law couldn't pay, someone else should cover for her. Targeted our house when she was not around. At the entrance, I had a push and pull conversation with the worker for a few minutes, and managed to make him understand and leave. But my mother-in-law had witnessed the whole scene. Without understanding the situation, she assumed I was arguing with my affair partner. Having learned the truth, my mother-in-law, still holding the microphone, turned to my sister-in-law and shouted, "How dare you embarrass me like this?" My sister-in-law wasn't the only one she was angry at. Her husband, standing next to her, also demanded an explanation with a furious expression. He grabbed my sister-in-law by the collar, looking as if he might hit her at any moment. Seeing this, my son and Danny said that resorting to violence would be counterproductive, and calmed down my sister-in-law's husband. The funeral venue turned into a battlefield. It's all because you do unnecessary things. It's your fault. Why would you hire a detective for an investigation? What does it have to do with you? My husband investigated to protect his mother and our family. That seemed to surprise my mother-in-law, and she looked at me with a "what do you mean" expression. My husband had been extorted for money by his mother before. Sympathizing with the hardships of his aging mother struggling to earn a living, he consulted me, and I saw no reason to refuse, suggesting that it would be fine to help her. I knew that my mother-in-law's lifestyle was very modest, and that she tried to manage within her savings as much as possible. I remember telling my husband that if she still couldn't make ends meet despite her efforts, we should help her. However, my husband grew suspicious as the amount of money my mother-in-law requested increased, and he conducted an investigation into her conduct. At that time, my husband had received a terminal prognosis and was very concerned about us being left behind. He feared that after his passing, my mother-in-law would continue to demand large sums of money from me. When looking into the flow of money, it turned out that my mother-in-law was receiving assistance from my sister-in-law every month under the pretense of insufficient funds for her children's education. In reality, it would have been fine if the money was actually used for educational expenses. But my sister-in-law was lying to my mother-in-law about the kids' educational costs and funneling the money into nightclubs. This result arrived from the detective agency when my husband was nearing the end of his life. Today he could live, but what about tomorrow? What if he never opened his eyes again after closing them? Every day was spent amid such anxiety and fear. Thus, I had no time to review the investigation results, and I neglected the documents that had arrived. After my husband passed away, a hectic daily routine suddenly started. My relationship with my mother-in-law was not good, but I thought since we shared the grief of losing a loved one, we could cooperate. But that was only my thought. My mother-in-law showed no interest in the funeral, and neither did my sister-in-law. How much is my son's inheritance? He worked until the last minute, so there must be quite a bit, right? He died young because he gave up on cancer treatment, didn't he? Well done, sister. It wasn't that he gave up on cancer treatment. I was shocked that it was believed he had given up because surgery was not possible. Grief and mourning are personal, and I thought surely they must be remembering and crying for my husband when no one was watching. But right after his death, to think and speak of things like how much inheritance there was, or that there must be a lot of savings because he gave up on treatment, it was beyond anger. I felt pitiful. Wanting to silence these two somehow, I checked the investigation results my husband had requested amidst my busy schedule. After seeing the contents, I was convinced that I could corner them with this information. I intended to expose everything after the funeral had settled down. But it was my mother-in-law who attacked first. My husband did not send money for nightclubs, Mother. Please repay all the money you gave to my sister-in-law. Wait a minute. I'm a victim too, aren't I? I was deceived as well. I wouldn't have given a dime if I knew it was for nightclubs. My sister-in-law's children were still young and were being cared for at her husband's parents' house, so they were not present at this scene. It was fortunate that they didn't have to know their mother was indulging in indecent games. With that, although my plan was slightly different, I disclosed everything without reservation. My mother-in-law's anger turned towards my sister-in-law, and she began to scream with a ferocious intensity. "You shameless daughter! Can you talk? You're just like your mother, who's been around men. It's in your blood, so it can't be helped." What started as an ugly parental argument, my sister-in-law's husband declared divorce. Then my sister-in-law began to apologize profusely to him. "I'm sorry. It was just a whim. Because Mom boasted about her flashy nightclub playing days when she was young. I just did it out of curiosity. When did I ever say such a thing? I'm not interested in nightclubs. Enough. It's all your fault. You couldn't quit your cheating habits even at your age and got dumped by my dad. Don't act like a mother now, you shameless old hag." I don't know which words hurt my mother-in-law, but gradually she became dejected and the situation turned into a one-sided blame game, with my sister-in-law scolding her. My sister-in-law insisted she was not at fault and that it was just a momentary lapse, clinging to her husband and begging him to reconsider the divorce. However, her husband's resolve did not change, and he declared that he would not only pursue a divorce, but also ensure that my sister-in-law would not get custody of the children. Still angry, he apologized to me for the disruption and left the funeral home. Once the sound of my brother-in-law's footsteps was no longer audible, my sister-in-law casually mentioned that mothers have an advantage in custody issues. It turns out he was kind of annoying. I thought it was the worst when I got exposed. But it turned out all right in the end, right? Mothers have an advantage in custody cases. I managed to get custody of our 2 children after all. The two, who had just been fiercely arguing, started to bond over the issue of custody. The mourners present were taken aback by this scene. Danny, hearing my mother-in-law's mothers have an advantage comment, seemed to recall past grievances and began to express his dissatisfaction bitterly. Danny apparently wanted to raise my husband himself and even took it to court but lost. At the time, his work was too demanding to spend enough time with the child. It's pathetic to live only by mooching off a child's salary. He harshly criticized her as unfit to be a mother, unable to even imagine how much the children would suffer from her repeated marriages and divorces. Hearing Danny's anger, my son, who has a trusting relationship with him and feels greatly loved, expressed his dissatisfaction, as he felt none of that from his grandmother. Dad sometimes complained, but if he had to be separated by divorce, he would have preferred to be with Grandma. He really wanted to live with Grandpa. Hearing those words, Danny tenderly stroked my husband's face. Indeed, whenever there was a problem, my husband had always confided in and relied on Danny. This hadn't changed from his childhood, and it remained the same even after he grew up and had a family of his own. When my husband entered a battling illness, Danny was the only one who came to see him whenever there was time. I can't forget the happy face my husband made every time Danny visited. Although the mother-in-law had taken in her young son, she often left him alone for days whenever a new man came into her life. It would have been one thing if she left money behind, but there were times she disappeared without leaving any money or food. Neighbors had to take him in, or the police got involved. Yet, she was his mother, and he provided her assistance as much as possible. I can't forgive my mother-in-law for ruining my husband's funeral. Mother, please leave. Go away with your daughter who is crazy about nightclubs. I want to say my final goodbye to my husband with people who truly loved him. I'm his mother. Are you saying you're throwing me out? My mother-in-law was outraged, not accepting the situation. But voices from the attendees could be heard, amazed that she could still want to stay after causing such a scene. Danny also urged the mother-in-law to leave so we could send off my husband quietly. And this prompted applause from those around. Having alienated everyone, the mother-in-law and sister-in-law felt uncomfortable and left after throwing some spiteful remarks at me. I apologized for showing such family disgrace and expressed my wish to continue my husband's funeral properly. The boss of my husband reassured me that I was not at fault, and I received warm applause from others. Electone live music began to play to bring back a funeral-like atmosphere. In fact, I had requested that we send off my husband with his favorite songs instead of a traditional religious feeling. When we carried out the coffin, during the last farewell, everyone placed a single flower into the coffin. My husband's body was covered in flowers, and then the coffin lid was closed. There was a little wait time for the hearse preparations after that, and people from my husband's workplace talked about his personality and how he was a loving husband and doting father. My uncle and aunt encouraged me, and my friends also told me not to hesitate to rely on them if I needed anything. A few of us carried the coffin to the hearse and headed to the cemetery, while everyone else stayed back and kept watching. On the way to the cemetery, I contacted my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. When I had previously asked how many people would be coming to the cemetery, I had included the mother-in-law and her party in the count. They usually provide a waiting room where you can eat and wait, but I had ordered lunch boxes for them as well. I explained all this, but after being kicked out of the funeral place, they stubbornly refused to go to the cemetery, prioritizing their pride. I think it's unfortunate for people to become so stubborn and prioritize their pride on such a final farewell, even though they refused to accompany us to the cemetery. I don't think they're cold-blooded just because of that. Each person faces and accepts death in their own way. I simply told them that they wouldn't be able to blame anyone for their regrets later, and ended the conversation. Later, my sister-in-law was formally divorced by her husband. It seems her husband had something on his mind as well, for he conducted an investigation into her conduct after the funeral. Besides her nightclub outings, she was also spending extravagantly on brand items, and child neglect for personal desires was commonplace. The story that she had left the children at her in-laws was mostly a lie. In fact, she had left them home alone when her husband was away on business trips. She went on trips with her favorite worker, leaving the children behind. Her children now live with their father and his parents, saying they prefer their father. My sister-in-law boasts that she will win custody because she is the mother, but it seems unlikely to anyone looking in. She dreams of a new life with her favorite worker while trying to milk child support from her ex-husband, using the children as leverage. However, that's a clear misunderstanding. The worker targeted her just for her money, as a part of his job. She was dumped easily and is now being threatened by the worker to pay her outstanding debts or he'll sell them off to dangerous people. She begged me for help using my husband's inheritance, but I turned her away, saying she should repay the amount she tricked from my husband along with her mother first. I have no intention of lending her money after repayment. My mother-in-law seemed to live a modest life, but she was actually just maxing out her credit cards. Now that the financial support from my husband has ended, her payments have faltered, and she's been blacklisted. She's now living a very poor life, struggling with repayments and looking significantly thinner. She came to me begging for money, but I turned her away. Don't you feel sorry for an elderly woman struggling to make repayments to this extent? You've lived as you wanted up to now, wasn't this to be expected? My mother-in-law tried every trick from sobbing to exploding in anger to beg for money. But in the end, she was caught stealing a $1 juice at a nearby supermarket. The store called me for a guarantor, but I refused. I suggested she ask her only relative, my sister-in-law, but it seems she had already been refused. Despite all this, I adamantly refused to take her in as if she were a stranger. I don't know what has become of her since, considering we could be harassed by my mother-in-law or sister-in-law. If we stayed in the house where my husband and I lived, I decided to move. It was hard to decide to leave behind the memories, but my daughter said to me, "Memories aren't things, right? They live in our hearts. Dad will always live inside us, Mother." We moved close to where my uncle and his wife live. From now on, for the life my husband wanted to live, we, as a family, vowed to live diligently for our 2 children. The funeral has already started and it's time to say goodbye to my mom. Where are you right now? Days have passed without contact from my husband. His voice over the phone sounded cheerful amidst the noisy background. You'll be surprised. I'm in Cancun celebrating my birthday with my parents. Can you hear the waves? Stunned by his insensitive words, I immediately retorted angrily. Mom has passed away. Don't you guys have any human decency? Tears welled up as I shouted into the phone. At that moment, my father tapped my shoulder. Did you get in touch with your husband? As I explained the situation to my father, his face grew increasingly filled with anger. Unable to tolerate my husband's outrageous behavior, my father raised his voice. I understand now. All right, everyone. Back to work from tomorrow. Get ready tonight. He loudly announced this to his subordinates at the funeral, who energetically responded, yes. Meanwhile, my husband and his parents were probably enjoying dinner in Cancun, oblivious and unconcerned about returning anytime soon. Imagining them getting angry, I smirked. My name is Julia. I grew up in a family of 3 with my father and mother. I had everything I needed and never lacked food, so I lived comfortably. However, during that time, I harbored feelings of discontent. My father, always focused on his work, hardly paid any attention to his family. He had worked at construction sites for many years, always coming home sweaty and dirty, which I found very unpleasant during my sensitive years. Sometimes, friends would ask me what my father did for a living, while other children could proudly speak of their parents being civil servants or doctors. I could not boast about my father. This led me to vow never to become like him. And I studied hard during my school years, eventually becoming the top student. However, my rebellious spirit drove my studies. and I had not given much thought to my future career. When my father once asked me if I was considering my future, I rebelled against him and ended up not pursuing further education, opting instead to work for a temp agency. Life as a working adult was not as easy as I had anticipated, fueled only by my defiance. It was then that I first realized that my father's advice had been right all along, and I appreciated the nobility of long-term employment. Eventually, I reconciled with my father. Perhaps due to this change in my mindset, I met Matt, a full-time employee at a major corporation, and soon we got married. He was an elite graduate from an Ivy League university. But because I was only a high school graduate, my in-laws did not think highly of me. Nevertheless, supported by my strong-willed character, which my husband admired, and my desire to settle down quickly, our relationship remained stable. Despite my wishes for a lavish wedding, we had a modest ceremony at a friend's venue, out of respect for my husband's preference for simplicity. Years passed, and we were both in our 30s. I had quit the temp job and was now working from home. One day, my husband came home looking unusually happy, so I asked him about it. I've been thinking about buying a new house for my parents soon. Watching him loosen his tie with a smile, I sensed that he had been influenced by his parents. While I loved my husband and he wasn't a bad person, it was apparent that he was somewhat dependent on his parents. His parents, too, doted on their son, always boasting about him being an elite employee at a major company. I suspected that his decision to buy the house was swayed by them. I've already found a plot of land. It's in a nice area on the outskirts of town. I'm thinking of building a big house there for the four of us to live in. I couldn't ignore what he just said. Wait a minute. Are you talking about living together? You decided this without consulting me? And what about the costs? It's okay. I discussed it with my parents, and they were very happy. I've thought about the costs and everything else. My husband was not listening to me. Convincing my in-laws seemed nearly impossible as they still held prejudices against me. And it was clear that they had driven the decision to buy the house. Furthermore, when I accompanied my husband to inform his parents about the construction schedule, he ended up revealing my displeasure with not being consulted about the house. Really, what are you thinking? Matt is the breadwinner, so there's no need to consult you. That's right. You just need to obey him. Anyway, to think that Matt is buying us a house, what a dutiful son. After being subjected to their sarcasm, I could say nothing in return and could only silently watch how things unfolded. Months later, the house that was a dream for my husband and his parents, but a nightmare for me, was built. Even after we started living with my in-laws, I continued my work from home. My husband was often absent due to work, and I used the computer in our bedroom for my job. However, my mother-in-law had no understanding of working from home. People from her generation probably don't grasp the concept of working from home. But that wasn't the end of it. She had always been harsh to me, and began spreading rumors about me in the neighborhood. Our daughter-in-law just lazes around in her room all day. What a problem. Our son Matt is truly splendid, but his only mistake was choosing the wrong wife. Hearing such things about me spread daily was unbearable. I had things I wanted to say to my mother-in-law as well. And similarly, my father-in-law harassed me. A wife should devote herself to her husband once she's in the house. But she seems to be just making her own pocket money. Really, she's an unpleasant wife. Despite everything, I chose to endure their direct insults and bad-mouthing without talking back. I knew it was futile to discuss anything with my husband, who was still dependent on his parents. Living in this nightmarish house was painful. But I firmly believed that one day the tides would change. Yet reality was cruel, and my situation only worsened day by day. One evening, the three of them went out together and didn't come back for a long time. I always prepared dinner, and my mother-in-law always criticized the taste. And that day I had finished preparing and was waiting for their return. Worried by their unusual lateness, I called my husband, who said something unbelievable on the phone. "I'm eating pizza with the family right now. You know, that popular pizzeria we saw on TV. So don't worry if we're late coming home." I couldn't believe his nerve as he laughed while speaking. He said he was eating pizza with the family, which seemed to imply that I was not considered part of the family. And soon, this suspicion was confirmed when they returned home. My husband first asked me, "Did you want to eat too?" Followed by my mother-in-law's sarcasm, "Don't be selfish, you're just a maid who does nothing." And my father-in-law's command, "Clean up quickly." While cleaning up the dinner they had dismissed, I, known for my strong will, finally reached my breaking point, and that night I cried alone in the bedroom. Yet, more hardships awaited me as my mother became bedridden due to illness. "I'm sorry, Julia. I know it's sudden, but we need you to come back. Ever since I was a child, Dad has been busy with work. And now I've taken over caring for Mom. It's okay. I owe it to you, and I understand your job is tough. I'm not the same person I used to be. I appreciate you saying that. Having overcome past rebellions, I now strive to understand Dad's work better than anyone. Mom never spoke ill of Dad even when I was against him. And even now, bedridden, she continues to believe in him. In honor of her feelings, I wanted Dad to be able to focus on his work. Yet, my in-laws continued to bombard me with cruel words. "Really, Matt has become so successful, and you can't even support him. Preferring your mother? Such a disappointing wife. A housewife who can't even manage the housework properly. Typical for the daughter of a poor carpenter, low-educated and so uncouth. A woman should devote herself to her husband for life." These were the harsh words I faced upon returning home, exhausted from alternating care for my mother after waiting for Dad to finish work. But what I couldn't endure was my husband's words. "Do you know why we didn't have a lavish wedding? Imagine introducing a carpenter's daughter to relatives and my boss. It would embarrass me. You just need to work as I say. You're nothing more than a strong-willed woman." I deeply regretted why I ever married such a heartless man. In my eagerness not to miss out on marriage, I foolishly nodded to someone who showed interest without much thought. Moreover, my husband didn't understand his own position, and was just showing off to his parents, forever dependent on them. Knowing this but unable to do anything about it, I had become far from the strong person I once was, merely enduring insults from those three and crying helplessly. Will there ever come a day when the tide turns? It was hard to imagine as the tough days continued. 6 months later, despite all the treatment and my desperate care, Mom passed away. Dad and I solemnly proceeded with the funeral preparations. Dad had been busy with work when Mom was sick, but he tried to lighten my burden as much as possible, which I felt deeply. His efforts seemed like regrets for his previous neglect and an attempt at redemption. I never mentioned it, but enduring the harassment from those three, Dad's efforts were the only encouragement for me. But those three were relentless in tormenting me. They had been unreachable since the day before the funeral. Dad seemed irritated by their rudeness, But he was too busy with funeral preparations to dwell on it. We finally got hold of my husband just in time for the priest to arrive on the day of the funeral. "What have you been doing?" "The funeral is starting, and it's time to say goodbye to my mom." "Where are you?" In response to my desperate plea. My husband's voice sounded cheerful over the phone, amid noisy sounds. "You'll be surprised. I'm in Cancun celebrating my birthday with my parents. Can you hear the waves? We're happily sunbathing on the beach." I was momentarily stunned by his utterly insensitive words, and immediately exploded in anger. "What are you thinking? Mom has passed away. Don't you have any compassion?" As I ranted, tears streaming down, a hand gently patted my shoulder. "What's wrong? Did you get a hold of your husband?" As I turned around, Dad initially looked surprised but became increasingly angry as I explained the situation. "I understand. All right, everyone. Work resumes tomorrow. Get ready tonight." After announcing this to his subordinates at the funeral, who responded energetically with a yes. The day after the funeral, I stood in front of the detestable house my husband had built for his parents. They were probably still enjoying dinner in Cancun, oblivious and unconcerned about returning any time soon. If I were to act, it had to be now. I gazed deeply at the hollow sandcastle my husband had built, imagining the scene that would make those angry. Then, as I saw several large trucks approaching, I smirked, realizing the time had come. "Ready, Julia?" As Dad stepped down from the lead truck, I quietly nodded. The many subordinates from the other trucks lined up in front of him. "All right, everyone. Follow the plan. Let's tear down that house. Go." At Dad's command, the subordinates shouted yes and swarmed into the house, packing everything into the trucks, emptying the house completely. "Well done, everyone. We might need to start a moving company too," Dad joked, eliciting laughter from his team. "Let's start the real work now." Again, at Dad's command, the subordinates readied the dump trucks and bulldozers. "Leave this to me." Dad then climbed into the bulldozer and began demolishing the house without hesitation. In the quiet suburban area, there were no neighbors to intervene, and Dad's handling of the bulldozer was so skilled it seemed as though he was merely dismantling a castle of sand. The suburban mansion that my husband had so proudly boasted about was completely demolished by Dad, leaving nothing but bare land. "Well done, everyone. After we leave here, get back to regular work." I thanked the subordinates, who all expressed their joy at being able to help the boss and their happiness at being useful. I truly felt proud of Dad. Despite my youthful rebellion against his focus on work, seeing him respected and loved by his subordinates, I realized everything he had done was right. And it was for this that Mom had believed in him. "Thank you, Dad, truly." With heartfelt gratitude, I thanked Dad. After that, I ended up living with Dad in our family home. A week after turning that house into bare land, those three furiously stormed in. "Julia, what the hell is this? Where's the house?" We came back and screamed, "What is this? Where did you put the house?" As my husband ranted in panic on our doorstep, I coolly responded, "Welcome back. Did you enjoy Cancun? I've put that land up for sale. And since you left me behind, I at least expected some souvenirs, right?" My attitude infuriated my husband, who turned bright red with anger. "Don't mess with me. Do you even realize what you've done? You're just holding a grudge because we didn't attend your mother's funeral, aren't you? Well, if you know that, at least go and see my mother's grave. Shut up. This isn't over. Right, Mom and Dad? Despite my in-laws glaring at me fiercely and agreeing with my husband, I had no intention of backing down. Everyone, it's been a while, hasn't it? I believe the last time was at Julia's wedding. Please, come in. It's awkward to have a discussion standing here. My father stood by my side with an unconcerned expression. You. How dare you say such things so brazenly? What you did is a clear crime. That's right. We have the police waiting outside right now. You'll pay dearly for destroying someone else's property. My in-laws said this and called the police from the patrol car outside. But neither my father nor I were intimidated. Oh. The police? That's actually convenient for us, right, Julia? Matching my father's smug expression, I nodded. Yes, it will quickly become clear who the real villains are. This might actually make things easier for us. Our calmness seemed to momentarily unnerve all three of them. However, it seems a bit unfair that only you call for backup. So, we'll make our own call. To a real estate agent. My father said this and made a call. Calling a real estate agent won't change the fact that you destroyed our house. While my in-laws ranted, I didn't miss the embarrassed look on my husband's face. He might be regretting his emotional actions upon arrival. But I thought it was too late, emerking. As the real estate agent arrived, the harsh reality my husband feared was laid bare. Yes, the house of my in-laws was originally purchased in my father's name. And he had paid for everything from the land to the construction costs. It was even him that practically built the house. No way. Matt, is that true? You told us you bought us the house. Matt, you said your father-in-law was just a poor carpenter. Their earlier momentum was gone, and my in-laws were now completely flustered. My husband could only hang his head in silence. Well, our company isn't that big yet. What Matt said wasn't entirely wrong. Perhaps I should hand out my business card. Receiving the card, my in-laws were dumbfounded. Though my father was modest, he was actually the president of one of the largest construction companies in the country. So their surprise was understandable. Despite understanding his own situation, my husband had shamelessly relied on my father to build that house to maintain appearances in front of his parents. No, that can't be true. Anyone can make a fake business card. You're lying. It must be a fake career history. That's right. The house was bought by our elite son, Matt. As my in-laws stubbornly clung to their belief, my husband remained silent, his face downcast. I decided to deliver the final blow without hesitation. Oh dear, you've been so quiet, like it's your funeral. It's a pity you weren't like this at my mother's funeral. My husband, unable to respond, just clenched his fists. Well, I guess you can't say it yourself. Shall I explain for you? As I spoke, my husband looked up, his voice trembling. Not that, please. Unfortunately, it seems the false career is your son's, not my father. My in-laws gasped in shock. Yes, the successful career path they believed their son had was all a lie. Soon after marrying me, my husband had angered a client due to his own mistake, which led to him being sidelined at work, and his salary was significantly cut. I started working from home because his income alone couldn't support us. Despite this, to save face for him, I never told his parents about our situation. Yet, he continued to indulge in luxuries like eating out. at expensive restaurants to impress them, with all the bills being paid by me. By the way, it was your birthday a few days ago, wasn't it? Happy birthday. Here's a present for you. Saying this, I thrust this month's credit card bill at him. Even after hearing all this, my in-laws, still unwilling to believe the story, pressured Matt. All that talk just now was made up, right? But Matt, completely drained of life, didn't respond, leaving them no choice but to slump their shoulders in defeat. However, my story wasn't finished. Now it was time to deliver the final blow to my in-laws. And I unleashed everything I had been holding back while enduring their constant jibes. I saw you walking with a woman I don't know. Curious, I followed you, and it turns out she's the hostess of his favorite bar. You seemed quite smitten with her. No. I mean, that's not. My father-in-law's face turned pale, and his eyes darted around. Just the other day, I saw the two of you leaving a fancy jewelry store arm in arm. I wonder how much you've spent on her so far. With no way to respond after being exposed, my father-in-law could only look down and mutter, "I'm sorry. Honey. To sneak around behind my back like that. I'm so disappointed in you." My mother-in-law started to accuse him, showing off her own weakness. "And you've been going to a nightclub almost every night. You slip out after your husband falls asleep from drinking at home. I know about your nightly outings." What? You saw that? My mother-in-law turned bright red, as if she wished she could disappear. "And you? What have you been doing behind my back?" Now it was my father-in-law's turn to accuse. But such a foolish quarrel between them was unlike anything I'd ever seen. It escalated into a physical fight and ended up being broken up by the very police officers they had brought along. After giving all three of them a thorough dressing down, I thought it was about time for them to leave this house. Turning to my exhausted husband, I said bluntly, "I don't know how much you spent in Cancun with that happy face of yours. But from now on, not a single penny from my earnings will go towards it." Wait, without your earnings, there's no way I can cover everything with my salary alone. My husband said weakly, then crouched down, holding his head. You all have too little respect for our jobs. You never tried to understand my work from home, treating me like a mere housekeeper. And you underestimated my father's work too. You got what you deserved. Serves you right. I spat these words out and then told the police officer, "Please, take these three away quickly." They resisted and struggled. But ultimately the officers, somewhat scolding them, led them away. I might be one of those people though, since I used to make fun of my father's work. As I watched the police car carrying the three of them drive away, I said to my father standing beside me, "But, Dad, you looked so cool driving that bulldozer." At my words, my father smiled shyly. After that, I demanded a divorce from my husband, but he refused, pitifully claiming he couldn't live without me, so the matter went to mediation. Thanks to my father's company's highly reputed lawyers, I felt secure handing it over. But my husband, having squandered everything in Cancun, couldn't even afford a lawyer. As a result, the mediation overwhelmingly favored my side, and I was finally able to divorce. While property division was discussed, I decided not to pursue it, knowing he had no means to pay, on the condition he never contact me again. Thus, the three of them, with the house now a bare lot, had to move to public housing. With my ex-husband's diminished income, there was no way they could survive without his parents finding work. Meanwhile, my remote work caught the attention of a major corporation, and I was offered a full-time position with excellent benefits. My father praised my work, and we both came to truly respect each other's professions. Maggie, right? Nice to meet you. Your pa, oh no, dressed modestly, don't you? Mom? Did you almost call her poor just now? That's terrible, saying such a true thing. That's why I didn't say it. I stopped myself just in time, so you should too. While smirking, the mother-in-law and sister-in-law were chatting. It was their first meeting face to face. And I felt incredibly uncomfortable with their attitudes. But since they were James's family, I tried to convince myself they couldn't be bad people. The father-in-law, a famous company president I had even seen on TV, was there too. His presence was intimidating. He didn't side with anyone, merely observing. Which was somehow frightening since I couldn't tell what he was thinking. I'm Maggie, 26 years old. James and I have decided to marry. And I am currently meeting his family. My parents have passed away. So we recently visited their graves together. My father died of illness when I was young. And my mother, who raised me alone, passed away last year after falling ill suddenly. Now with no family left, I thought I had to live on my own. But James was always by my side. Without saying much or rushing anything. His quiet presence was calming. When my mother realized she was sick, she worried I would be trapped by memories and began discarding her belongings. Ultimately, only the wedding dress she wore at her marriage to my father was left. Whether intentional or not, my parents loved each other deeply. And I guess she couldn't bring herself to throw away that memory. I too want to build a family that loves each other like my parents did. I hope to wear this wedding dress at my own wedding someday, ideally with James. 2 years later, James and I began the steps to become a real family. That wedding dress is still carefully preserved. These clothes are just more comfortable and easier to move in. I tried to respond cheerfully to the teasing from the mother-in-law and sister-in-law. It wasn't worth going into battle mode over. It was just that my clothes were more plain than theirs, no big deal. Still, I was shocked, as I had thought hard about what to wear to meet James's wealthy family. Far removed from the life of ordinary folks. Is this what commoners wear, I wonder? Maybe it is. Why don't you touch it for the memories? It's so rough and funny. They laughed again, mocking my attire. It was tough standing up to the two of them alone since James was delayed by sudden work. The conversation eventually turned to why James and I were getting married. Can you believe it's so clear just by looking at her? She's completely out of our league. Is she marrying for inheritance? Since she has no parents, is she after our wealth? How brazen. Commoners' thoughts are so barbaric. Barbaric? I wasn't after any inheritance. And I couldn't understand why I was being accused of such things. The one-sided barrage continued, and I grew tired. When I'm tired, my thoughts start to spiral into negativity. I thought, I guess I really am not good enough for James. Gradually, I couldn't even respond anymore and just looked down. That was when James arrived. Sorry I'm late. When I finally looked up, there was James's face, providing a much-needed sense of relief. Oh, there you are. We were just explaining to her how different in status she and James are, how troublesome it is. Right, Maggie? Why, yes. I was disappointed. Seeing my state, James loudly declared. Status doesn't matter. I just want to marry Maggie and be with her forever. Please don't make her feel down with unnecessary comments. Anyway, if the greetings are over, we should be going. We've got a wedding meeting to attend, we're busy. Despite their arrogant demeanor, the mother and sister-in-law didn't start a fight. So, James got angry. The two seemed shocked and were visibly downcast. We were wrong. Go ahead and plan the wedding as you two like. So please, don't be so angry. The mother-in-law pleaded tearfully. She had always been the obedient good girl. So being scolded by James was a shock to her. Maggie, I'm sorry too. It wasn't all serious. Since James chose you, we support you. Let's get along from now on. Suddenly, the mother-in-law and sister-in-law turned to me with smiles. I couldn't help but wonder about their earlier behavior, but peace is best. So I greeted them with, "Thank you in advance. We want to support you, so let us know how the wedding preparations are going. We'll do anything we can. Thank you. Oh, and about the dress. You can choose any dress you like from the shop we always use." About the dress. James cut in. We've already decided on the dress. Maggie plans to wear her mother's heirloom dress. I had told James that I wanted to wear my mother's heirloom dress. And he was delighted and fully supportive of the idea. Oh, is that so? Well, if James thinks it's good, then it's fine by me. That's wonderful, Maggie, to be able to wear your mother's dress. Could you show it to us sometime? Yes, of course. The shift in their attitude was almost frightening. Later, when I showed the dress to the mother-in-law and sister-in-law, they praised it highly. Given that these were the same two who had called my attire poor at first meeting, I was a bit nervous about what they would say. But it was okay. Then the sister-in-law suggested, "You know, we should use one of our rooms to keep this precious dress safe. We'll even include a mannequin. It's our wedding gift to you." Oh. That's too much. It's been fine just the way it's been kept up till now. What are you talking about? It's almost time to showcase it at the wedding. So it should be stored properly. Please, let us take care of it. It will be in even better condition than now, and you can use it even after the wedding. Enthusiastically offering to store the dress on a mannequin in their room. I agreed since they were so insistent. The unused room quickly became even nicer. And the mannequin donned the dress like a display. A strange but visually appealing arrangement. I was initially worried. But it seemed James's family had come to support our marriage, which was a relief. As other preparations progressed steadily, the day before the wedding arrived. The dress was to be transported to the venue the next day. When James and I went to the room to retrieve it, there was a slight smell of burning. Maybe there was a fire nearby? The smell was strong inside the house, which was concerning. We headed straight for the dress, where the burnt smell grew stronger. After exchanging a look with James, we opened the door. And there was a shocking sight. It was burning. My mother's dress, along with the mannequin, was on fire. No way. I was too stunned to move. In the meantime, James quickly grabbed a fire extinguisher and started spraying. He tried to extinguish the flames that were spreading outside the dress. It was the first time I had ever seen a fire extinguisher in action. Before I knew it, I was crying, watching my mother's dress burn and James struggling to put it out. I felt utterly helpless and couldn't stop my tears. It was an almost unreal scene. Once the fire was out, James came back to my side. The dress was completely burnt. No, why? I didn't know what to say or feel, I was just stunned. It burnt to a nice color, didn't it? I heard a voice from behind and couldn't believe my ears. It was the mother-in-law's voice. How shameful to try to appear at our family's wedding in such a tattered dress. A poor girl after inheritance. Divine retribution, that's what this is. The mother-in-law had reverted to the disdainful person I first met. Mom, how could you? I can't forgive this. I will never forgive this. I didn't do anything specifically. But, just think, we nearly had that ragged dress at the wedding. It would have been a disgrace for generations in our family. I don't know why it burned. But it turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Thankfully, it was just here that burned. Not the house. Lucky, right? Oh, and by the way, you can cancel tomorrow's ceremony. I'll cover the cancellation fees. No, we will not cancel, I said, wiping away unstoppable tears. I'm not going to be defeated. I will definitely marry James. I thought, this is the start of becoming a wonderful couple who love each other. Just like my parents. Oh, really? Well, I'm looking forward to tomorrow then. The mother-in-law said dismissively as she walked away. I thought, Mom, I'm sorry. The only keepsake has turned into this. A feeling of guilt toward my mother overwhelmed me. James was still there by my side. I continued to cry for a long time, gradually calming down. But then, from my sorrow, anger began to emerge. We just wanted a happy marriage, nothing else. It was unbearable to be treated this way when we hadn't done anything wrong. The mother-in-law claimed ignorance, but I couldn't believe that was possible. For now, we decided to report to and consult with the venue. I was conflicted about whether to borrow a dress at this point. Having not considered any dress other than the one, I felt nothing for any others shown to me. And so, the day of the wedding arrived. Because James is the son of a famous company president, the ceremony would be filled with television and streaming cameras. Initially, I was resistant to the idea, but I resolved myself to it, knowing it meant being with James. Peeking at the preparations, the venue looked more lavish than I imagined, making it feel like it wasn't my wedding. The mother-in-law and sister-in-law were dressed even more extravagantly, mingling and laughing with the guests, making them compliment their outfits, and saying, James's bride is just a commoner, so plain and simple. Her dress must be something hastily put together from yesterday. Sorry, we'll be catching everyone's eyes instead. It was our wedding, but they acted as if they were the main characters. In a way, I wanted to tell them to expect to become the real main characters soon. But for now, I just quietly watched from the sidelines. The main ceremony was about to start. I had decided to walk down the aisle with James. I debated walking alone but wanted to start the path with James, who had been by my side since I thought I'd be alone. Hand in arm, I walked slowly down the aisle, reflecting on my life so far and savoring the reality of living forward with James. Compliments like beautiful could be heard from the guests. Usually, the entrance is watched in silence, but it was nice to hear such voices. Then, suddenly, loud laughter broke out. I can't take it anymore. What's happening? You're making me laugh, stop it. Of course, it was the mother-in-law and sister-in-law. Thought it was a crow. Right. Right. A wedding dress has to be white, right? Ah, see, the dress got burnt to a crisp yesterday. Maybe that's why she's wearing a burnt crisp dress. Ah, makes sense. A burnt crisp crow dress. Perfect for that commoner. They were gleefully chatting away. I endured. There was no point in retorting here. Let those who want to speak do so, I told myself, focusing on walking forward, ignoring them. I was amazed at how continuously they could dish out demeaning comments. Be quiet. It's disrespectful to James, Maggie, and everyone attending. Besides, don't you know about the black dress? Suddenly, the father-in-law spoke up. The two went silent, making faces of regret. The venue quieted down, and the ceremony proceeded solemnly. The black dress carried a strong message that it would not adhere to anyone else. After much distress about not being able to wear the original dress, this was the solution I chose. With this black dress, I wanted to affirm my love for James and aspire to be an even more loving couple than my parents. James agreed. After the incident, he couldn't genuinely look for a new white dress. Remembering my mother's dress, learning the meaning behind the black dress from the planner, I was drawn to it and decided on it. After the ceremony, there was a break before the reception. The guests were seated, and we entered to a warm welcome. Once again, we savored our happiness together. As we took our seats, a large screen in the venue displayed a video. Everyone probably expected a slideshow about how we met or from our childhood. But the video shown was completely different. It showed the room where my mother's heirloom had been stored, displaying the mannequin and the dress that had burned completely yesterday. A figure entered, set the dress on fire, watched as it spread, then turned and walked towards the camera before disappearing. The fire grew as the video played. Watching this, everyone in the venue turned their attention to one person. I thought, just as you wanted, sister-in-law. You've become the center of attention at this venue. I said this in my mind. What is this? Stop it. Turn it off. Voices of protest were heard, but there was no stopping it. I had control of the video switch. Just as the dress was almost fully engulfed, James and I appeared on screen, with him extinguishing the fire. The video also clearly captured the person hurling abuse at us, drawing everyone's attention once again. Don't look at me. This isn't me. It's a fake. Someone made a fake video. Yes, that's right. Just because the dress burned, they're trying to pin it on us. How shallow and foolish of commoners. Of course, our statuses are different, aren't they? Despite their ranting, I was no longer afraid. The strength of the black dress had given me strength as well. The video was from a hidden camera James had secretly installed in that room. It seemed he hadn't trusted his mother and sister. He showed it to me after we had decided on the dress yesterday, and I thought to reveal it at today's reception. I feared it might be deleted or edited to look fake, as the mother-in-law had mentioned. So I wanted to show it here where everyone could see. As expected, the individuals in question were denying it, but the video was unaltered. Something the police could confirm. Indeed, given that this was the wedding of a big company's president's son, there were off-duty police officers in attendance, and we managed to have an officer come to the venue. The sister-in-law seemed to be guilty of arson of her own property, which could lead to imprisonment from 6 months to 7 years. It's my house, I can do whatever I want with it. What's this about? I'm the victim here. She resisted vehemently, but it seems she didn't know that even if it's her property, arson is still a crime. Ultimately, it became clear she was just someone who, obsessed with money, lacked basic societal norms. And the mother-in-law spectacularly betrayed her daughter, claiming she acted alone. But the father-in-law did not entertain this and quickly disowned her. Right there in public, he announced a divorce. He had been fed up with their antics for a while, and this event was the last straw, convincing him she was beyond teaching proper values. Thus, due to this wedding, both the mother-in-law and sister-in-law were ousted from the family and became no longer related to me. Afterwards, as James began to be groomed as the next company president, I supported him while we built our form of happiness together. Despite my initial stereotype of a company president being arrogant, my father-in-law was not. He listened well to James and me, and incorporated employee feedback to grow the company. I looked forward to working together moving forward. After the sister-in-law's imprisonment, those two, perhaps thinking to retaliate, began frequently uploading videos slandering me. That commoner has stayed in our house targeting our wealth. To everyone watching this video, don't be deceived. Help us return to that house quickly, were some of the baffling messages in their videos. However, because the live video broadcast during the ceremony showed them laughing at the bride, no one paid them any attention anymore. Their videos gained no traction, only accumulating dislikes. Yet they continued uploading videos, and with each upload, their clothes appeared cheaper, and their financial difficulties became increasingly evident. They might have hoped to earn from the videos, but eventually, even that ceased. How are the former sister-in-law and her mother, both with challenging personalities and now with a criminal record, managing to live well? The answer is unclear. But one can guess that their lives, far from being as comfortable as before. In contrast, James and I, despite being busy, are truly becoming a family. Today, looking at our wedding photos, we laughed together. I wouldn't change a thing about you. I will continue to live with James, committed to this in my wedding dress. I feel like my parents are watching over us from heaven with smiles. Our 5-year-old daughter underwent surgery but unfortunately passed away. As I grieved, my husband appeared indifferent. Neither he nor his parents attended our daughter's funeral. Did you make the call? I've been calling, but it won't connect. Where could he possibly be? Throughout the funeral, I couldn't mourn our daughter as I was continuously trying to reach my husband. Just as we were about to move to the cemetery, I finally got through to him. Where are you? We're at the cemetery now. If you don't hurry, you won't be able to say goodbye to Ashley. When I urged him to come quickly, he responded lazily and shockingly. I'm not coming to the funeral. Right now, the dog is sick and we're at the vet. So, just handle the funeral there. Oh, but don't think you're keeping all the condolence money. I was stunned by his words and stood there dazed after he hung up. How did it go? Will he be able to come soon? He said their family dog caught a cold, so they're all at the animal hospital. Looks like he's not coming. What? My father was even more furious than I was that my husband's family wasn't coming. He couldn't forgive them and decided to take action. My name is Sherry Morgan. I am 28 years old and work as a web designer. I lived with my most precious daughter, Ashley, and my husband, Wayne. Ashley is currently 1 year old. She has grown into a very cute girl, but her birth was difficult. My water broke when I still wanted her to grow inside me a bit longer. And she was born weighing only 50 ounces. Immediately after birth, she was placed in an incubator without me even holding her, as her organs were still immature and she had to undergo multiple surgeries. Thankfully, she survived the surgeries. However, my joy was short-lived as I was told by the doctors that Ashley would need round-the-clock care even after being discharged. She would have to be fed through a tube, and it was uncertain when her illness might recur. I regretted not being able to keep her safe inside me longer and cried endlessly. I blamed myself every day, wondering why my child had to go through this. This physical and emotional toll was compounded by Wayne and his parents. Although Ashley wasn't in a state to receive visitors at birth, Wayne had informed his parents and my parents about the birth. While my parents decided to celebrate later and ended the call, his parents reacted differently. "She's born? We're coming to the hospital right now." Excited by the news, his parents rushed over without fully understanding Ashley's current condition. "Wayne. Where is Ashley?" Wayne guided his parents with a slightly awkward expression on his face. When they saw Ashley, his parents said, "What is this?" Seeing Ashley connected to many tubes and unable to be held, they blamed me. "Why didn't you give birth to a healthy grandchild for us?" That's right. Do you know how much we were looking forward to our grandchild? Unable to even get out of bed after a cesarean section, I was scolded by his parents. Pretending to be sick. Why don't you get up and explain? Why did you marry Wayne if you can't give birth to a healthy child? What are you going to do about this? When will this child be cured? After being severely reprimanded, I looked to Wayne for help. I need to use the restroom." Saying so, Wayne fled without helping me. After he left, I ended up apologizing to his parents while crying. "I'm very sorry." After that, my in-laws lectured me for about an hour. But Wayne did not return during that time. Finally, after the in-laws had left, Wayne slowly came back. I suddenly had a stomach ache and was in the toilet the whole time. What Wayne said was clearly a lie. His eyes were evasive. I asked him why he left when I was being so blamed. "Why did you leave when I was being blamed like that? If you had explained properly over the phone, this might not have happened." I tearfully expressed this to Wayne, hoping he would reflect on my plea and consider his future actions. I believed he would, but he let out a heavy sigh and said to me in an annoyed tone, "Mom and Dad didn't do anything wrong. And it's no surprise you got yelled at. Ultimately, it's your fault for not having a healthy child. Don't talk like it's somehow my responsibility too." With that, Wayne clicked his tongue and left. After that, he never visited the hospital again. Even after we were discharged, he continued to treat Ashley and me coldly, avoiding facing us. "Hey, I bought Ashley a cute outfit today. Doesn't it look nice?" No matter how much I tried to reach out, Wayne remained indifferent. Whenever I thought he was about to talk to us, he would avoid us. "I have a drinking party tomorrow and the day after, so I don't need dinner. Also, I'll start having breakfast at work from tomorrow." While I understand the desire to avoid the reality that our daughter isn't like other children, this attitude can't continue forever. I asked Wayne to at least cooperate a little in raising her. "Hey, Ashley is your child too, right? Please, just listen to me. Help out with raising her." I looked into Wayne's eyes for the first time in a while and shared my feelings. But he did not meet my expectations and coldly pushed me away. "If that's the case, maybe you should have given birth to a healthier child. Don't push your responsibilities onto me." With that, Wayne put even more distance between us. No matter what I said, he wouldn't listen, and no matter how much I pleaded, it was futile. I almost gave up on getting any help from Wayne in caring for Ashley. When I needed a break, I decided to ask my parents for help. "I have to go to the hospital today, so your father is coming over to take care of Ashley. Then I won't come home until late at night. In fact, I'll stay at a colleague's house. Wayne always made sure he wasn't around when his parents visited our home. He did this because he didn't want them to find out that he wasn't involved in parenting at all. On the days my father would come, he would kill time somewhere else and pretend to be busy. I just passed by Wayne at the station. He said he'd be working late into the night again. It seems so. Wayne is such a hard worker. He must be working so hard to provide for us since Sherry is doing her best with the childcare and housework. I wanted to tell the truth, but without solid evidence. It would just sound like I was complaining. Hearing that Wayne is working so hard makes me feel like I need to do my best in taking care of Ashley too. Seeing my father deceived by Wayne hurt me. Actually, Ashley has surgery next month. Could you or Mom come that day too? Sure, I understand. Is Wayne working that day? He's also working hard for Sherry and Ashley. I'll take a day off to be there for the surgery. Thank you. My father always prioritized me and Ashley. He is a musician who appears on TV and magazines. Not only is he talented in composing, but his good nature is also well recognized, allowing him to appear as a commentator on news programs and variety shows. Despite his busy schedule, he would take time off work to be with us whenever Wayne couldn't, postponing even important engagements. When Ashley turned 5, my mother-in-law, who had been estranged and hadn't been in touch since Ashley's birth, suddenly called. Frightened by her sudden contact, I didn't answer the phone. The ringing continued for a while and then went to voicemail. When I played the message later, it made me shudder. Hello? Is Ashley better now? You haven't shown your face to us since she was born, have you? And it's causing talk among the neighbors. They've never even seen their granddaughter, and they wonder if we're lying. So if Ashley is healthy, come show your face here. Hearing my mother-in-law's voice for the first time in a long while was as selfish as ever. She wanted to meet, but her reasons were just to appease the neighbors, which didn't make me want to go. However, as soon as Wayne returned home, he said without listening to my opinion, "We're going back to my parents' house this weekend." Wayne must have been told by his parents over the phone. We hadn't gone to his parents' house before, but he suddenly started saying we should. I wanted to refuse because of the harsh treatment I received right after giving birth. But it had been 5 years. Reluctantly, I thought I had no choice but to go. Then the day came when we were supposed to head to his parents' house. "Hey, help me get Ashley into the car." "What?" "I don't know about that." "Do it yourself." Even though Wayne had decided to go to his parents' house, he didn't help with the preparations, causing us to be much later than planned. We were supposed to leave at 11 o'clock, and now we're 40 minutes late. You're always so slow. If you had helped, we could have left much earlier. I was upset being spoken to like that and retorted. During the drive, Wayne was in a bad mood, and he continued to grumble all the way to his parents' house. "I shouldn't have married someone like you. If it were my child, by now he'd be in tutoring, swimming, and learning English, becoming an elite. You've ruined all those plans." I tried to ignore Wayne's words as much as possible and looked out the car window. It was tough even after we arrived at his parents' house. "Hurry up and get inside. What if the neighbors see this?" His parents must have thought Ashley was now healthy when they saw her in a wheelchair. They immediately worried about the neighbors seeing and rushed us inside. "Wayne, you made sure the neighbors didn't see us." From the parking lot to the house, right? Of course, I'm being cautious. Wayne and his parents talked as if Ashley were something to be ashamed of. Their conversation made me instinctively want to retort. Excuse me, but... I was about to retort when my mother-in-law interrupted me. Sherry? How long are you planning to keep Ashley like this? She should be getting better by now, right? If you keep her in a wheelchair and take care of her like that, she won't get better if you coddle her. My mother-in-law clearly didn't understand Ashley's condition, just as she hadn't from the beginning. Even when I explained her symptoms, she wouldn't listen and would yell, assuming she would get better as she grew. My father-in-law also had no intention of understanding and spoke arbitrarily. Are you causing trouble for Wayne? Get surgery done quickly and cure her. Otherwise, we can't even say we have a granddaughter at work. My father-in-law showed no intention of understanding and made unreasonable remarks. I also realized that even after 5 years since Ashley was born, they still hadn't accepted her as their grandchild. Had I known I would be subjected to such comments, I would have never come to their home. I wanted to leave this place as soon as possible. Wayne, I'm taking Ashley back, so give me the car keys. What? No way. Plus, it's a car I bought with my money. What makes you think it's yours? If you want to go home, take the train. Wayne said this and went back to the living room to snack and chat with his father. While waiting, I was barked at by the family dog, which thought I was an intruder. Sherry, could you please not stress out Max? Also, if you keep letting him bark like that, the neighbors will know you're here. Scolded, I was pushed out to wait at the front door. A chilly breeze blew, and I draped my cardigan over Ashley. Then I spoke to her as if reassuring myself. Ashley, I'm sorry. Just hang in there a little longer. Daddy will be here soon, and then we'll go home. 2 hours later, Wayne finally said he was ready to go. We'll come again. Yeah, next time just Wayne is fine. Let Ashley come after she's healed. Though I was implicitly told not to come again, I thought it was for the best. However, on the way home, Wayne said this. We'll go again next month. What? But didn't your mother say not to come? That's obviously a lie. If we really don't go, they'll say we lack sincerity and get angry. Make sure we go next month and the month after to keep them happy. Wayne interpreted his mother's words this way, but I couldn't understand it. I don't think it's a lie. We weren't even allowed into the living room today. I really think we shouldn't go anymore. When I objected, Wayne sighed. This is why my mom dislikes you. You should just do as I say. Thus, persuaded by Wayne, I ended up agreeing to go again next month. And when the day of our next visit to his parents' house came, Wayne began to complain. I don't feel like going today. You go by yourself. What? If you're not going, shouldn't we all just not go? I'll tell your mother we're not coming today. What? My mom isn't just sitting around, she's made time for us. Just go already. His selfish remarks left me dumbfounded. Complaining about Wayne here would only lead to him retaliating later. I wanted to avoid Ashley being scolded, so I decided to comply. Upon arriving at his parents' house, they indeed did not look pleased. Why did you come? We told you not to come anymore. There's no point in you coming if Wayne isn't here. I'm sorry. We were not even let inside and were scolded at the entrance before being sent away. It turned out to be a wasted trip, and when I told Wayne about it, he just laughed. Of course, you weren't let inside, huh? My parents really don't like you guys, Huh. Wayne was just playing with me and Ashley. Overwhelmed by Wayne's demeaning game, I finally raised my voice. What do you mean by that? It takes over 30 minutes just to get Ashley ready to go out. Plus, we never know what kind of illness she might bring back when we go out. You might think this is just a game, but it's really troublesome for us. Stop making us go through these meaningless trips. For the first time, I raised my voice and vented my true feelings to Wayne. Wayne seemed surprised by my sudden assertiveness, but quickly returned to his usual demeanor and said, "Don't get so angry. After all, it's your fault for not letting my parents see Ashley, isn't it? Your parents come to see her often. It's your unfair attitude that's the problem." Wayne's response was off the mark, and he yelled that I should leave. I could no longer bear to stay with Wayne, and decided to go back to my parents' house. When I finally returned to my parents' house, they warmly welcomed me and Ashley. If you had waited at home, I would have come to pick you up in the car. It must have been hard coming all this way. Mom has prepared some coffee, so have a drink and relax. I'll take care of Ashley in the meantime. My father lovingly cared for Ashley, allowing me to rest. I heard you had an argument with Wayne? That must have been tough. Wayne probably didn't mean to lash out at you and Ashley. He was just tired from work and happened to take it out on you because you were there. Don't worry about it. My father didn't know the full story and tried to smooth things over. Thank you. I could only thank my father for his kindness. Then, without telling me, he called Wayne. I just called Wayne. He said he regrets what he said and told me to tell you that you can come back anytime. What? Wayne said that? I was surprised by the message from Wayne, as he had never apologized before. Just then, I received a message from Wayne on my cell phone. Oh, a message from Wayne? Maybe he's saying he misses having you and Ashley at home? My father teased me as I read the message. But my brief upliftment crashed as I read Wayne's true sentiments. The message stated that it was more comfortable without us, and that we should just stay at my parents' house permanently. What did Wayne say? I hesitated to tell my father the truth of the harsh message. He said maybe we should stay here a bit longer? Can we stay at my parents' house for another month or so? I just got back, so I want to sort out my room. I lied on the spot, trying not to worry my father, who happily agreed that we could stay as long as we needed. A week after staying at my parents' house, Ashley's condition suddenly worsened. While I was in the bath, my mother burst in, saying something was wrong with Ashley. 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 Calm down. Let's call the hospital first. In a panic, I called the hospital and an ambulance. While accompanying a frantic Ashley in the ambulance, I contacted Wayne. Hello? Ashley suddenly got worse, and she's having emergency surgery. Wayne responded with his usual lethargic voice. Oh. Surgery? Well. I wondered if he was going to complain again. Amidst my anxiety, my father arrived in his car. Sherry, how is it? Did you get through to Wayne? Just as I heard his voice, Wayne said to me, I'm coming now. Which hospital? It's the general hospital near my parents' house. I told him our location, and he hung up immediately. His sudden change in attitude surprised me, and I relayed this to my father. Wayne is coming now. That's good. It'll be reassuring for you to have Wayne there. Although my father said that, I couldn't genuinely feel happy. The reason for this unease would become apparent later, but for now, I was just confused. Father. I'm sorry, Thank you for being by Sherry's side for me. I'll be here now, so it's all right? The first thing Wayne said when he saw us was to show concern for my father. In that moment, I sensed that flattering my father was more important to him than anything else concerning Ashley. Ah, thank you. Now that Wayne is here, I guess I'll head home. Call me if anything happens, I'll come right away. As my father said this and handed over to Wayne, he left. And Wayne immediately changed his attitude. Ah. I was relaxing at home. Don't make calls in front of your father. It forces me to come. What do you mean you have to come? It's only natural. She's your daughter? I was bothered by Wayne's way of speaking and retorted. It implied that if my father hadn't been there, he wouldn't have come at all. His indifference towards his own daughter was too much. I knew it wasn't the time for a quarrel between spouses during Ashley's surgery. But I couldn't hold back. Whatever the situation, you have to come immediately if something happens to Ashley. That's what you're supposed to do as a parent. After I firmly stated this, Wayne got angry at being lectured and started to grumble unhappily. Don't impose your common sense on me. You don't even know my situation. What situation could possibly be more important than Ashley? There's nothing. Surely, Wayne was just upset because he had been pulled away from playing mobile games at home. I was disgusted by his lack of parental responsibility. Wayne fell silent, and the atmosphere became tense just as the doctor appeared. Seeing the doctor's uncomfortable expression, I sensed everything. The doctor then spoke heavily. Is it Ashley? Ashley had died during the surgery. For a moment, I could only stare at the doctor, unable to even blink. Then I just broke down crying. I was still unable to grasp the reality of losing my daughter. And after informing my parents, Wayne also notified his parents. My parents came immediately, but his parents did not come at all. I had no time to ponder what to think about his parents not coming, as I quickly became busy with the arrangements for the funeral and other procedures. And as I started preparing for the funeral, I suddenly realized, where's Wayne? Initially, I thought he had just gone to the bathroom. But Wayne never reappeared, and the funeral proceeded. Where's Wayne? Both my father and mother started looking around for him, noticing that Wayne and his parents weren't there. Sherry, why don't you try calling Wayne? Prompted by my father, I called Wayne. But no matter how many times I dialed, the call wouldn't connect. The attendees also noticed the absence of Wayne and his parents, causing confusion. I kept calling Wayne throughout. Then, an announcement to move to the cemetery was made. Wayne, where are you and what are you doing? I continued calling Wayne while performing my duties as the chief mourner. My father also helped me call until we finally got through to Wayne. Where are you? We're at the cemetery now. It's your last chance to say goodbye to Ashley, hurry up. As time pressed on, I rapidly fired these words at Wayne. Then, with his usual lethargic voice, he responded. I can't, I'm not coming. Just handle it there. Oh, but make sure you don't take all the condolence money. Why aren't you coming? And your parents too. Even if they hate us, isn't it common courtesy to come? It's not the time for Ashley's funeral here. Wayne raised his voice in response to my words. Right now, Max is sick and we're at the vet. I even stepped outside the hospital just to take your call. I'm going back inside, so I'm hanging up. Wayne prioritized the cold of the dog at his parents' house over his daughter's funeral. He cut the call without waiting for my reply. I was stunned by his unbelievable words. What? I tried calling again, but by then, I was already blocked. I wondered if this was really more important than Ashley's funeral. There were surely other options, like entrusting the dog to someone else or using a pet hotel. Besides, all three, Wayne and his parents, went to the vet. Couldn't just one of them have come? Sherry. What did Wayne say? My father approached as I stood there stunned. Until now, I had been making excuses to save Wayne's face. But I couldn't think of doing so anymore. I relayed exactly what Wayne had said. Wayne doesn't intend to attend the funeral. He said it's more important to accompany the dog at his parents' house, which has a cold. As I spoke out loud to explain, I became increasingly sad and began to cry. Meanwhile, my father looked puzzled and frowned. What do you mean? Then, I explained that Wayne and his parents were currently at the vet. And despite not attending the funeral, they still wanted the condolence money. That's too much. Just because the dog has a cold doesn't mean everyone has to be there. My father comforted me by patting my back. While consoling me, he seemed to be pondering something. Of course, I understand being worried about the dog. But Wayne could have left it with his parents and come to Ashley. He should have explained the situation and come to be with Ashley. This isn't just about today's funeral. Actually, Wayne has been neglecting us for a long time. I also revealed how arrogantly he behaved at home, and how we were treated poorly at his parents' house, continually subjected to insults. My father was at a loss for words, having never imagined Wayne would do such things. So, from Wayne's perspective, this funeral might just be another trivial event. As I said this out loud, I felt even sadder and my tears wouldn't stop. My father didn't say anything, just stayed by my side. Then, a few minutes later, my mother came to call us as it was time to say goodbye to Ashley. Shall we go? Let's talk about Wayne later. My father said that, and I shifted my focus from Wayne to Ashley. After saying goodbye to Ashley, the long yet fleeting day passed. Back at my parents' house, I once again discussed everything from the beginning about Wayne and his parents. My mother was also surprised that Wayne had prioritized the dog over Ashley. I also mentioned that I had been unable to contact Wayne since then. They probably feel relieved that Ashley and I are gone. Thinking that makes me so frustrated. As I let out my feelings of anger from deep within, my parents silently nodded in agreement. I really understand how you feel, Sherry. Can you let your dad handle things about Wayne for a little bit? Yes. I had no idea what my father was planning. As I stood there confused by his words, he said, "It's okay. Leave the rest to me and take some time to rest." I decided to take my father's advice, take a break from work, and relax at home for a while. A few months later, my father, who is a musician, released a new song and an essay. My mother and I were checking the TV program where my father was going to appear. "Look, Dad is going to be on next." When asked about the reasons behind his new releases, my father explained. "Actually, my granddaughter passed away at the age of 5 due to an illness. Both I and my daughter were devastated. And then, the actions of my son-in-law were unbelievably thoughtless. I channeled all those feelings of sadness and anger into these works." As soon as my father finished speaking, there was an immediate response to his song and essay. Some analyzed the lyrics, others took excerpts of my father's statements to express their opinions, and many who were in similar situations expressed their sympathy. It became big news. Many supported my father and me, criticizing those who could act so inconsiderately. Most people watching the TV didn't know Wayne. Although they couldn't pinpoint the person, those who knew Wayne immediately understood who it was about. Because when Wayne had first married me, he bragged to everyone that my father was the well-known musician, Brian Jackson, who appeared on TV and magazines. I married the daughter of that Brian Jackson. Cool, right? Well, if you really want, I could get you his autograph or something. Wayne had boasted about this to his friends and colleagues. His respectful behavior towards my father had always been about getting autographs to show off to people around him. If he ever upset my father and we became estranged, getting autographs and boasting would become difficult. Therefore, in front of my father, he had always acted like a devoted husband. However, now, his actions of spreading the word around had backfired. I started receiving multiple messages from friends. Since Wayne had also been deceiving my friends, his true nature was revealed, and they were angry as if it were their own issue. Amid these messages and calls, I also received a call from Wayne. I was busy replying to friends and had ignored it, but the phone kept ringing. He had blocked my calls up until now. But when things went south, he unblocked me and reached out. The display showed Wayne's name, and I reluctantly answered. Hey. Withdraw what your father said immediately. I'm getting lots of calls here, and so are my mom and dad, and it's causing trouble. Do something about it. It seemed Wayne was also receiving a lot of contacts. Not only Wayne, but his parents had also been bragging about my father to others. Come on? You'll listen to what you say, right? I was reflecting, so tell him to withdraw his statement. Even through the phone, I could tell Wayne was panicking, probably looking pale. Knowing this, I told them that I absolutely do not intend to ask my father to retract his statement. No way. This is your last chance to see the consequences of how much Ashley and I have suffered. Maybe it's time you face some public backlash and reflect? I said this, but Wayne still insisted. Please. Okay, fine. You can keep all the condolence money. You're probably just upset about the money, right? Do whatever you want with it. It's not about the money. I reflexively raised my voice in anger. It's not the money, it's about not forgiving your actions towards Ashley and me all this time. Your parents included. I finished speaking in a low tone and hung up the phone. My mother, who had witnessed the entire ordeal, immediately knew the caller was Wayne, and after I hung up, she gently rubbed my back. Thanks to my father's actions, maybe Wayne's family would reflect a little. That's what I thought, but they took an unbelievable action. One night, as my father returned home, the doorbell rang almost immediately. My mother checked the intercom and suddenly screamed. What's wrong? My father took over to check, and there stood Wayne and his in-laws. My father cautiously pressed the intercom button while on guard. Yes? Ah, Mr. Jackson, I'm terribly sorry for the trouble our son has caused you. While speaking with a slight smirk, my father-in-law spoke. My father assessed that they had not come to attack and continued the conversation. Ah. And what is your purpose here? Well, we wanted to retract the statement made on TV today. That's impossible. Please leave. My father firmly rejected the in-laws. Their attitude changed instantly. We went out of our way to come down here and even humbled ourselves. And this is the attitude we get? Don't you have any compassion? That's right. We didn't even need to come here. And ultimately, it's your daughter's fault. If she had just given birth to a healthy child, none of this would have happened. Excuse me, but do you understand what you have done? Huh? We just wanted a healthy grandchild. All we did was discipline a daughter-in-law who couldn't provide that. What's wrong with that? That's right. It's because you didn't discipline your own daughter properly. So we had to do it instead. The root cause of all this is in your family. No matter what they heard, they wouldn't listen and insisted that everything was our fault. My father remained calm, but he had reached his limit with their disrespectful behavior. Trying to win the public over is useless. In the end, it will be revealed that you were the wrongdoers. You're blaming us for not having a healthy child. If I sit here quietly, you just say whatever you want. Regardless of the child's condition, our mission is to love and nurture. What? That's just empty talk. Perhaps due to the noise made by my in-laws. A neighbor called the police, and officers soon arrived. What, the police? This is an overreaction. We were just. My father-in-law panicked upon seeing the police, probably realizing deep down that they were in the wrong. They scattered like spiders but were quickly apprehended and taken away. Even during the police questioning, they were still concerned about public perception. The next day, we learned that reporters had been in front of our house, and the commotion caused by Wayne and his parents was covered in a weekly magazine. The headline questioned whether the heartless words in my father's essay were about this family, and it quickly became a hot topic. People who identified the individuals involved flooded Wayne's and his father's employer with calls questioning why they were employed. Due to the high volume of calls, Wayne and his father were placed under house arrest. The three of them, slandered by strangers, gradually became afraid to leave their homes and eventually resigned voluntarily to live quietly somewhere else. One day, Wayne mailed a divorce petition to my house. Along with it, he included a letter. All rights to our house will be transferred to you. Wayne and I, along with Ashley, had lived in that house. He left all rights to the house and other assets to me, and they seemed to have fled somewhere. Seeing the letter, my father said, "That's good, isn't it? At least the divorce went through without any trouble." Yes, I nodded to my father's words and promptly filed the divorce papers. Years have passed since the divorce. I have now lost my beloved daughter Ashley, divorced Wayne, sold the house, and lost everything. I have no regrets about divorcing Wayne or selling the house, rather, I felt relieved. But losing Ashley has left a gaping hole in my heart. Even so, Ashley wouldn't want to see her mother like this. I'm looking forward, return to work, and am gradually getting back to normal life. Ashley, Mommy is going to do her best again today. I speak to her at the family altar every day, drawing strength from Ashley. Even if I meet a wonderful partner and have children in the future, I will never forget Ashley. When I am blessed with a new life, I plan to tell that child about Ashley. For Ashley, I aim to make each day wonderful. Go home now. In the bridal waiting room, as I wished my daughter well on her marriage, she abruptly told me to leave. Her expression was far from what one would expect from a bride in her wedding dress, and I was baffled. With a disgruntled twist of her face, she said, "I don't need you in my life anymore," further deepening my confusion. Had I done something to warrant such a statement from her? "You're as good as dead to me, so just disappear." Her previously sulky expression twisted into a malicious grin. It seemed she had hidden my existence from her fiancé because she was ashamed of me. I never intended to live a life that would bring shame. But my daughter lined up numerous complaints against me, blaming me although her accusations were merely selfish presumptions. Pointing this out now wouldn't make her understand. I decided to fulfill the bride's wishes. Yes, I understand. If my daughter doesn't need me, then it's fine. As per her wishes, I decided to keep my distance from her from now on. With that resolution, I left the venue. However, 3 hours later, she called me. I initially ignored the calls, but they were so persistent that I finally answered. She sounded desperate. Come back to the venue right now. I am Grace. At 55, after divorcing my husband 25 years ago, I've been managing both work and raising children on my own. The reason for the divorce might sound cliché: my husband's affair. At the time, our son, Aaron, was 10, and Hannah was just 5. I struggled with the idea of taking their father away from them. However, my husband refused even to discuss it and left us with just a divorce application. I felt guilty toward the children, but continuing the marriage wasn't possible without considering them, since their father left without a second thought. Whether divorced or not, having an absent father would be the same. Hannah felt a bit lonely without her father, but after a month, she stopped mentioning him. Aaron was actually relieved about the divorce. Apparently, my husband had introduced his mistress to Aaron, thinking he would understand because they were both men. Aaron expressed his disgust toward his father. Aaron is now a lawyer, having been driven by his disdain for his father to help those suffering from infidelity. This year, after a decade with a law firm, he quit and just opened his own small practice. Hannah works in medical administration at a major hospital in the next town. Since graduating from vocational school, she's been living on her own and seldom visits home. While I feel a bit lonely, I'm happy knowing she's doing well. Now that the children are grown and independent, I'm enjoying living alone, often taking shortcuts in household chores. I sometimes settle for delivery or ready-made meals for dinner, and enjoy drinking alone the night before a holiday. One day, Aaron visited and brought me some pleasant news, although it wasn't about him. Surprisingly, Hannah was getting married. I felt a bit upset not hearing it from her directly, but it was undoubtedly good news. I asked Aaron about her fiancé, and he was astonished that I knew nothing. He seemed frustrated with Hannah. Hannah has always been negligent. She'd remember things she needed for school at the last minute, or bring up assignments past their deadlines. Probably, she either forgot to tell me or assumed Aaron would. Aaron sighed as he shared what he knew. Hannah's fiancé is a surgeon at the hospital where she works. They've been dating for 2 years. Given her track record of short-lived relationships, I was surprised that she managed to maintain one for so long. Aaron laughed, suggesting she must be serious this time. After Aaron left, I tried calling Hannah to learn more, but she didn't answer, nor did she call back. Getting through to her is rare, maybe once in 10 tries. But I needed more details. Her fiancé might come for a greeting, and there could be a meeting with both families. If her fiancé were visiting, I'd need to clean the house. And if I were meeting her future in-laws, I'd want to dress appropriately. I tried contacting Hannah several times, but she never picked up. Usually, she only calls during Easter or Christmas to ask about meals, or when she needs money due to financial hardships. She'd come home for holidays if her favorite dishes were prepared, but otherwise, she wouldn't. When she asked for money, I suggested she move back home if things were tough, but she'd refuse and just ask for a money transfer instead. She didn't want advice, just financial help. Hannah works in the town next door. Commuting from home would be financially smarter. But she refuses, so I occasionally help her to ensure she doesn't struggle to eat. Assuming she wouldn't want to hear any nagging, she probably didn't answer my calls. Reluctantly, I reached out to Aaron again. According to him, her fiancé's parents were busy working abroad and wouldn't be back until the wedding day. So there wouldn't be a formal meeting between the families. They planned to handle the greetings on the wedding day itself. Aaron suggested they should at least greet each other beforehand. But Hannah stubbornly refused. She insisted that the wedding was their own affair, and they'd marry regardless of any objections, so greeting on the day would suffice. I could understand her point, but knowing each other as soon-to-be relatives seemed important. Maybe my thinking is outdated? On the day of Hannah's wedding, I hadn't received any communication or invitation from her. But knowing the venue and date, I dressed in a formal dress to celebrate her. Probably, in her typical negligent manner, she thought Aaron had informed me and didn't send an invite. Maybe she planned to but forgot. I had some reservations about whether Hannah could manage being a surgeon's wife. But today was her big day, and I intended to celebrate without any criticisms. When I arrived, I wasn't sure where the bridal room was due to the multiple weddings and the crowded lobby. If Hannah had informed me, I wouldn't have troubled the busy staff. After the staff guided me to the bridal room, I thanked them and knocked on the door. Hearing Hannah's voice, I opened it. She was already dressed in her wedding gown, looking so beautiful in the mirror that I almost cried with joy. "Congratulations on your big day." As I spoke, Hannah's face contorted. I couldn't understand why she looked so displeased on what should have been a happy day. Perhaps she had some anxiety about the marriage, or was worried about getting along with her future in-laws. Pre-wedding greetings and family meetings would have eased such concerns, I thought. But today was her special day, and I didn't want to lecture her. I tried to reassure her with a smile and approached her. But she snapped, "Why did you come? You weren't invited," and forcefully pushed me away. I was shocked. I had never seen her be violent, though she was often harsh with her words. I couldn't believe she would do this, and though I hadn't received an official invitation, I couldn't grasp that she hadn't invited her own mother. "Go home now." My daughter glared at me and said. Her expression was far from what one would expect from a bride in her wedding dress, and I was utterly confused. When I asked her why she wanted me to leave, she twisted her face in displeasure and said, "I don't need you in my life anymore," which left me even more baffled. Had I done something to make her say such a thing? "You might as well not exist in this world for me, so disappear." Her unhappy expression twisted into a sly, malicious smile. "Why would you say such a lie? It's because you were such an unattractive woman that you got cheated on. And we ended up in a single-parent home, living a constrained life." My daughter answered in a rough tone. I had never intended to make my children live a deprived life. To avoid being labeled as just a single-parent family, I had actively participated in school events. I never missed celebrating important events like birthdays or Christmas. And I always gave them an appropriate amount of pocket money for their age. Although it might sound self-righteous, I managed to get both my son and daughter through college and vocational school without scholarships. This was possible because I had been working at the same company since graduating from university, holding a position that earned more than most women my age. Yet, my daughter still thinks we lived a poor life and lacked freedom. The allowance was too little, and the reason I couldn't go to the private high school I wanted was because you were the kind of woman who would get cheated on. My daughter looked resentful, thinking that if both parents had been together, she wouldn't have had to feel this way. She probably thinks that if both parents had worked, we could have afforded a more affluent life. Indeed, the reason my husband left might have been partly due to my lack of appeal. But not sending my daughter to the private high school wasn't because of financial issues. If she had a genuine desire to study something specific at that school, I would have sent her even if it had been a struggle. However, her only reason for wanting to go there was because she liked the uniform, so I simply didn't allow it. I was at a loss for words, never having imagined that she would blame our financial situation. Thinking I was cornered by my silence, my daughter attacked me with a triumphant look. I've worked hard not to end up like you, living a poor life, and making sure I wouldn't be the kind of woman who gets cheated on. From middle school, my daughter had put a lot of effort into her appearance, and she was quite pretty. Unlike me, who only wore simple makeup, she was very skilled at it. She had boasted about never being without a boyfriend. My daughter believed that I was cheated on because I lacked attractiveness, and she has always seemed to think that appearance is everything. Despite my efforts to teach her that it's what's inside that counts, she never seemed to understand. People judge by appearances. Thanks to my beauty, I can marry someone high-spec. She snorted with pride. Since I'm marrying a doctor, if it comes out that I was raised in a poor single-parent home, the engagement might be called off. Just go home. But won't your fiancé find it strange that your mother isn't at the wedding? As my daughter continued to insist I leave, I posed a sensible question. She replied, that's fine. It'd be more suspicious if you were here. It seems my daughter has also lied to her fiancé and his family, claiming her parents died in an accident when she was in middle school. She told them that she and her brother supported each other using their parents' inheritance and that she was able to graduate from vocational school thanks to her brother's success as a lawyer. Moreover, she set herself up as a diligent girl who struggled to balance study and part-time jobs for her future. In reality, my daughter has never worked a part-time job. She hung out with friends almost every day after school, and her grades were below average. It's astounding how she could come up with such fabrications. Doesn't she think her lies will be discovered, or is she confident they won't be? I think such lies are easily uncovered. Also, she seems to think that me being cheated on and divorced is shameful. But I've never lived in a way that I consider disgraceful. Every complaint my daughter made was her own selfish belief or whim. But even if I point this out now, she would likely just get angry and not listen. Since today is her wedding day, I'll respect the bride's wishes. Yes, I understand. If my daughter doesn't need me, then so be it. As she wishes, I'll no longer involve myself with her. With that decision in my heart, I left the venue. While I was on my way home in a taxi, my son called. When he asked where I was, I honestly told him I was on my way back. What? Hannah's ceremony is about to start. He was very surprised. But when I explained what my daughter had said, he became furious. I'm not attending my ungrateful sister's wedding either. He said that and hung up. I don't know if he really went back, but that's for him to decide. When I arrived home, I changed out of my formal dress into something more comfortable and decided to relax. I had cleared my schedule for the wedding, so it looked like I could take it easy today. I poured some tea into my favorite mug and settled down to relax. About 3 hours after I got home, my daughter called. She had dismissed me as unnecessary, saying she didn't need me. I was angry too. even as a mother who cherished her. Being spoken to that way was infuriating. I have emotions too. Especially now, I didn't feel calm enough to talk, so I ignored the call. But she kept calling over and over, so reluctantly, I answered. Before she even confirmed it was me, she blurted out something incredibly selfish. "Come back to the venue right now." Why? The ceremony should be over by now, shouldn't it? I couldn't understand why she would insist on me coming back. After the wedding was surely over. After all, it was she who had told me to leave, so why should I return now? However, she kept begging in a near tearful voice. It seems the director of the hospital where she works noticed my absence at the reception and made a fuss about it. Unbeknownst to me, I had been invited by the groom's side. I work in medical device sales. I had been visiting the comprehensive hospital where my daughter works long before. She started working there, so I knew the director well. And the hospital was planning to sign a contract to introduce a very rare surgical robot in the USA, which the groom was going to use. That's why I had been invited to the wedding. Even without an invitation from my daughter. I could have attended because of the groom's invitation. But there was no sign of me at either the wedding or the reception. The director, noticing this, asked the venue staff to check the guest list. My name was already marked as checked in. However, even though all the hospital staff invited to the wedding searched the venue, I was nowhere to be found. The groom and the director were perplexed when a venue staff mentioned, "If it's that person, I guided her to the bridal room earlier, so I saw her leave." Now my daughter was being questioned by the groom and the director. Furthermore, the absence of her brother, who was supposed to have supported her all along, put her in a difficult situation. After being subjected to my daughter's unreasonable anger, I no longer felt like celebrating for her. However, I couldn't ignore my professional connections. Reluctantly, I decided to head back to the venue. My daughter sounded relieved and thankful. But even if I went to the venue, it wouldn't help her. If her lies were exposed, I would only tell the truth. My daughter would learn firsthand what happens when you care only about appearances and neglect your inner qualities. As I was getting ready, I received a call from my son, Aaron. It seems that my daughter, Hannah, had also called him asking for help. Although he was angry and had said he wouldn't attend the ceremony, it seemed he couldn't completely ignore his sister's plight. Aaron was waiting at a cafe near the venue, ready to attend the ceremony if Hannah apologized to me. However, as the time for the ceremony and then the reception passed, Hannah did not contact Aaron. It's unlikely that no one noticed the absence of the bride's brother. Hannah probably covered it up with some plausible lie. I sighed in exasperation at my daughter's continual lying. Aaron sounded frustrated on the phone, saying, "I don't think Hannah has any intention of apologizing. You don't need to go either, Mom." But because of my work connections, I had to go. When I told him this, Aaron said he would come to the venue with me. So we decided to meet in front of it. This time, I wore my business suit instead of the formal dress and hurried to the venue. I met Aaron in front of the venue and we proceeded to the bridal room from which I had been ousted hours earlier. Upon opening the door, unlike a few hours ago, I found Hannah out of her wedding dress and in casual clothes, along with the groom and the hospital director. I bowed to the groom and the director, apologizing for leaving after being invited. The director asked why I had suddenly left. I was told to leave by my daughter. I was just fulfilling the bride's wishes for her special day. The groom and the director, who had been told that Hannah's parents had died in an accident, looked at her suspiciously. I reintroduced myself as the bride's mother. Then, Hannah started to make excuses. No. This person is like a relative who took care of me. But Aaron interrupted her, saying, "She's our mother who raised us single-handedly." When Aaron corrected her lie, Hannah tried to pressure him. She was just a relative who acted like a mother, right? Right, brother? However, Aaron did not cover for her and scolded her for lying. Then turned to the groom to apologize for missing the ceremony. It seemed Aaron and the groom were meeting for the first time. According to the groom, Hannah had said, "My brother is a successful lawyer who travels around the country. And he can't make time until the day of the wedding." And had refused a meeting between the families. That was supposed to happen before the wedding. She probably wanted to prevent the truth about me being alive from coming out through her justice-driven brother. She must have thought that on the wedding day, with all the hustle, her lies would not be uncovered. Even if there wasn't time to talk to the groom, there should have been conversations with his family. It was naive of Hannah to think she wouldn't be exposed. If she truly wanted to erase my existence, she should not have invited Aaron either. But that would break the narrative of siblings supporting each other. So she had no choice but to invite him. "What do you mean? Hannah lied to me?" The groom confronted Hannah. She excused herself by saying she thought the engagement would be called off if it was known. She was from a poor single-parent family. The director was shocked. Poor? Who? The director knew I was a top-performing salesperson in medical device sales, which typically pays higher than normal sales positions. I might even earn as much as the groom, who is a surgeon. The director explained and Hannah said, "But I received little allowance. And I wasn't allowed to go to the high school I wanted because it was private." The groom, looking incredulous, asked how much allowance she received. In high school, it was $50 and in vocational school, $100. But that's gone quickly when you go out with friends. And my friends had much more money. The high school Hannah attended did not prohibit part-time jobs. Her friends simply earned their own money through work, unlike her. Isn't that enough money if you add a part-time job? That it runs out quickly. The groom pointed out, and Hannah looked caught. Indeed, she had told the groom she had struggled to balance study and part-time jobs for the future. It's no wonder the groom is suspicious. Was even the part-time job a lie? I can't trust anything about Hannah anymore. The groom slumped, overwhelmed. Hannah clung to him begging for forgiveness, but he remained silent, head bowed. The director, unable to stand it, asked if there were more lies. Then, in a flash of defiance, Hannah blamed me. "It's all because you were stingy." Apparently, she couldn't see that blaming me, when her lies had been exposed, would only worsen her image. I wondered how she turned out this way, when I had tried to educate her just as well as Aaron. Perhaps her education was the only thing I got wrong. Hannah had grown up just like her father, who was frivolous with appearances and spending, always ready to dip into the family budget when his salary wasn't enough. I had repeatedly cautioned her about money, when she wanted to go to a private high school and when she asked for more allowance. But it seems none of it had resonated with her. Whether I was stingy or poor, it was Hannah who decided to lie about it because she felt ashamed of me. I recognize the effort you made to be beautiful. But it's not right to adorn yourself with lies just because you lack confidence. As I pointed this out, Hannah snapped. I didn't lie because I lack confidence. I lied because I'm ashamed of you. Even so, It's wrong to pretend your mother doesn't exist. If she had simply said we didn't get along, it wouldn't have been a lie. If she hadn't piled on lies to make herself look better, she wouldn't have lost the groom's trust. I always tried to remain calm when admonishing my children, especially as they grew older, because raising my voice could lead to escalated emotions rather than a focus on the issue at hand. Surprised by my raised voice, Hannah flinched and froze. Aaron gaped in shock, and both the groom and the director voiced their disbelief, looking coldly at Hannah. Unable to bear the situation, she collapsed to her knees and started crying like a child. I thought to myself, this must be what chaos looks like. Only Hannah's crying filled the silence, and the atmosphere was stark. Then the director spoke up. This might not be the best time, but... He suddenly asked me not to cancel the contract for the surgical robot. I understood his feelings, even though it seemed an odd time to bring it up. I had worked hard to bring this rare surgical robot to the hospital, where my daughter worked because of the director, unbeknownst to him. However, now that it was known my daughter was related to me, the director felt a crisis about the robot's introduction. The groom also pleaded earnestly. Even though my daughter had just been crying loudly, she seemed to realize how important the robot's introduction was from the director. And groom's attitude toward me and pleaded, "I'm sorry. It was all my fault, so please, just the contract with the hospital." As it was a work-related issue, I wanted to say my daughter's behavior shouldn't affect it. But this time, I had mixed personal feelings into the contract. It wasn't the director's or groom's fault. But I told them I wanted to reconsider everything once I got back to my company. The director yelled at my daughter, "What have you done?" And the groom was in shock, murmuring, "My career." I decided this was no longer just a family issue but a hospital matter. And I left the bridal room with Aaron. Later, I received a call from Hannah. She had previously dismissed me as unnecessary. I ignored the call for a while, but she kept calling, so I reluctantly answered. "Mom, it's all your fault the engagement was broken off. What are you going to do about it?" As soon as she spoke, my daughter began to blame me. Despite having explained her mistakes and apologizing once, she was still trying to pin the blame on me, which was appalling. As I remained silent, she continued to rant about her current situation. It seems she had angered the hospital director, and rumors had spread within the hospital. The male staff who had previously adored her now kept their distance. Her already strained relations with the female staff had worsened, and the whispering had increased. Hannah was using her engagement to a surgeon to boost her status and complained, "Now that the engagement's broken off, people will say that women who can marry are winners, and those who can't are losers, right? So, what group do you belong to now, huh? They'll say it's the lowest, isn't it awful?" I was ashamed of Hannah just as she had said she was of me. No matter how much she polished her appearance, without inner substance, it was meaningless. I pitied my daughter for still not understanding. This even after her engagement was called off. When would she ever realize? It's all your fault, Imam, so you need to take responsibility and take care of me for a while. I was shocked by my daughter's absurd demand. Apparently, she was planning to resign from her uncomfortable job at the hospital and return home. But coddling her now would not help her recognize her mistakes. I decided to toughen up, perhaps too late, but as they say, the mother hawk pushes her chicks off the cliff to teach them to fly. Everything you've done up to now has made you who you are. You're reaping what you sowed. My words angered my daughter, who hurled vile insults at me. But I was unyielding in my stance. Also, don't think about coming home. You tried to erase me from your life, so you should live by your words. When I told her I would not support her anymore, she flipped and spoke sweetly. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't mean any harm. She seemed to find it hard to continue working and desperately wanted to quit. But living alone would be difficult if she resigned. She had come begging for money even while earning a salary, likely having saved nothing. She pleaded not to be abandoned. But coddling her would only encourage her not to reflect on her actions. Her behavior on the day of the wedding, pretending to be remorseful, and then showing no actual remorse, was a prime example. I simply told her, "You'd better try your best," and hung up. After that, she called many times, but I did not answer. Later, I learned from the director that Hannah had resigned from the hospital. I apologized for any trouble my daughter had caused him and her ex-fiancé. But the director said there was no need, as the surgical robot would still be introduced as planned. It's rather I feel sorry that I couldn't help your daughter enough to prevent her resignation. The resignation was her own doing. The director didn't truly feel responsible for her resignation. When I assured him not to worry, he easily shifted the conversation to the upcoming surgical robot. Hannah, now unemployed, was struggling with her job search. She had sold most of her expensive beauty products to make ends meet. I heard from Aaron. He also refused to help her financially. She gets carried away too easily when pampered. However, he sometimes took her out for meals. During one of those meals, she reportedly acknowledged how privileged she had been. I hoped she would genuinely reflect and grow into a self-reliant adult woman. The inheritance is all mine. Dad would definitely be happier if his son would inherit it, instead of some woman who's not related by blood. You're not my sister anymore, I'm cutting ties with you, my brother said with a sneering smile. Indeed, to our father. I was not related by blood as I was my mother's child from a previous relationship. Still, he loved me as his own daughter, which made him very special to me. I felt angry that my brother wanted to monopolize everything our father left. But I was relieved by his words about cutting ties. Fine by me. In return, once you inherit, don't ever contact me again. Like I'd ever do that. Don't expect any money from me later, not even a penny. I am Kelly, a 29-year-old civil servant. My brother Steve is 22 and just graduated from university this year. He often brags about his company being more famous and successful than the rural city office where I work. Must be Dad's genes, right? I've got the blood of a dad who worked for a major corporation. Yeah, very impressive. Steve often brings up the matter of inheriting our father's traits. Although we share the same mother, we have different fathers. Steve is the child of our current father and mother, while I am the child of my mother and her ex-husband. Although I'm technically a stepchild, Dad never despised me for it and cared for me deeply. I don't really remember my real father much, as he ran away with his affair partner when I was little. Thus, I regard my current dad as my true father. When Steve was younger, he never mentioned that I was a stepchild, or that we had a different father. However, when I was an adult and he was still in middle school, our mother died in a car accident. Unable to cope without blaming someone, Steve convinced himself that it was my fault. At the funeral, he cried out, "Why did Mom have to die? It would have been better if it were you. No one would be troubled if the step-sibling were gone." No matter how shocked he was, Being told such things made me lose any affection I had for my brother. I wanted to argue back at such a harsh statement, but our father, who I had never seen so angry, scolded Steve fiercely, so I chose to remain silent. Naturally, my relationship with Steve deteriorated. Initially, he tried to surpass me academically, but aiming too high. He failed to get into his first choice schools for both high school and university. He couldn't out-earn me either, as I was a full-time employee. And he was just a student part-time worker. There were plenty of other fields like sports or arts where he could have competed. But fearing failure, he stopped taking any challenges. As blood relation was an undeniable fact. He thought he could dominate by poking at that without any need for effort. Eventually, Steve just kept mocking me for being a stepchild. And not the real child of our father. It was probably just misplaced anger from losing our mother at first. But as he grew up, he genuinely started to believe. Dad and I are the real family, and the sister is an outsider. As my sister is a stepchild, I have a higher standing than her. I grew tired of dealing with such a selfish brother. He would provoke unilaterally, lose by his own measures, and get angry. I got so exhausted dealing with him that I started to dismiss him carelessly. When Steve chose to commute to university from home, I moved out to live alone in an apartment. When I would come back home, I made sure to coordinate with Dad to visit when Steve wasn't around. 4 years later, Steve graduated from university and managed to get a job at a fairly renowned local company. I had prepared a tie as a graduation gift. Of course, I got a job at a much better and more famous company than the city office where you work as a civil servant. Because I have the blood of a dad who works for a major corporation. His character apparently hadn't changed even in 4 years at university. I decided against giving him the gift. I continued to live alone and commute to work, while he lived with our father, and faced the rough waves of society as a new working adult. That lifestyle didn't last even a year before Dad suddenly fell ill. There were no signs when we talked on the phone the night before. He passed away so suddenly that I didn't even have time to say goodbye. At the funeral, I served as the chief mourner. And thanks to Dad's prior arrangements about what was needed and which procedures to follow, everything except the inheritance was smoothly handled. The problem was the inheritance. The only living inheritors were Steve and me. I had a feeling that discussing it would inevitably lead to conflict. I found some documents about the inheritance in Dad's room, but I knew they wouldn't be followed exactly. Steve arrived over 30 minutes late for our meeting without apologizing, and immediately said something outrageous. The inheritance? I'm the real child, so I'll take it all. You, as a stepchild, are just an outsider. Isn't it greedy for an outsider to claim the inheritance? Steve kept laughing about being the real child and monopolizing the inheritance. I was so tired of dealing with him all my life that I put forward a condition and promised to renounce the inheritance. I won't inherit anything from Dad. In return, you must never contact me for the rest of your life, no matter what. Are you stupid? Like I'd ever contact you. Don't expect anything from me later, just disappear. Disgusted, I stood up to leave while Steve just kept smirking. I fondly remembered how cute he was as a child as I left. The next day, I went to a law office to proceed with the legal aspects of the renunciation of inheritance. Kelly, you said you don't have any inheritance rights as you are a stepchild of your father. Actually, Dad formally adopted me, so I do have rights to inherit his property. But I don't want anything anymore. I'll renounce the inheritance. The lawyer's acknowledgement came as I interrupted him. Although I hadn't mentioned it to Steve, Dad had officially adopted me after marrying my mother. Therefore, even though we weren't blood related, we truly were parent and child. I was aware of everything Dad owned from the estate investigation. Yet, I wanted to be free from the complications of being called a stepchild or a legitimate child, so I had chosen to give up everything. A month later, the lawyer informed me that the family court had accepted my renunciation of the inheritance. Reluctantly, I contacted Steve. Hello? My renunciation of the inheritance is complete. You know, from the estate investigation Dad had. Steve cut me off, shouting, "Shut up. I get it that you've renounced the inheritance. Stop acting like a real sister and don't ever contact me again." He hung up and I sighed deeply. Knowing that Steve would eventually come crying made me feel even worse. 3 months passed, and then I started receiving numerous calls and emails from Steve. Reluctantly, I answered the phone, hearing his exhausted voice. "You know what? I need to borrow some money. Dad had debts, and I can't keep up with the repayments. I used Dad's savings too, but it's not enough." "What?" "Sure, Dad had some loans to repay, but if you used all his savings for it, it shouldn't have been this bad." When I responded that way, Steve yelled back, "Did you know about this? Did you push the debt onto me knowing all this? You have such a bad personality. Oh right, because you're just a stepchild. You must be jealous of me, the legitimate child. Who hung up the phone when I tried to tell you? Who blocked my calls? I thought I'd email you out of pity, though. And yet you unblocked me when you got into trouble? Who's really the one with the bad personality here?" I had learned about Dad's financial situation, including his significant debts, as part of my renunciation process handled by the lawyer. I had tried to inform Steve, but he had cut off all communication, so I left it at that. As expected, he ended up coming to me in tears. Sure, Dad worked for a big company. But can you imagine how hard it was to send you to high school and college? There were educational insurance and Mom's life insurance. But things like the house and car had to be paid with loans. I'm not your sister, right? You should talk to the mortgage lender or the lawyer instead of me, an outsider. What are you talking about? Don't sweat the small stuff. Besides, I'm treating you like a sister even though you're just a stepchild. So be happy about it. Come on, Kelly, give me some money. Furious at his smug voice, I hung up sharply and blocked Steve's number. He didn't know where I lived alone. And I hadn't left any clues about my home at Steve's house. Just to be safe. I even got a new cell phone, thinking that would stop his calls, but I was wrong. Kelly, please, I need money. Otherwise, I can't survive. Steve started showing up at the city office where I work. Unlike when he acted arrogantly towards me, he now appeared genuinely distressed, visiting me repeatedly. He only came during lunch breaks, which seemed to indicate he was sneaking out from his job. On days he didn't visit, he would still call multiple times, disrupting my work. I explained the situation to my boss, and they moved me to an administrative position. But then he began staying past closing hours, refusing to leave until he saw me. After work, I caught him waiting for me and dragged him to the parking lot. Stop it already. Don't cause trouble at my workplace. I told you to consult the loan institutions and the lawyer. He finally stopped pretending to be polite and looked down at me with arms crossed, anger in his voice. I already consulted them, okay? The insurance from the group credit life policy means I don't have to pay for the house anymore. The car's left with about $5,000. So I negotiated to reduce the monthly repayment and keep using it. Then you're not really struggling to live. Dad only had those 2 loans. What are you begging for money for? His anger softened suddenly, and he looked around nervously. When I pressed him further, he reluctantly began to speak. Actually, Dad had quite a bit of savings. So I spent it on various things and went over budget. I borrowed money from a friend, but now I can't pay it back. That guy's going around saying I scammed him, so now I can't borrow from anyone else. If I can't borrow from friends, I'll have to go to predatory lenders. Then I'll have to repay with borrowed money, and I can't make ends meet. My head ached deeply as I sighed. His story was convoluted. But I understood the mess he was in. You mean you keep borrowing money to repay debts and now you're stuck? Yeah, that's it. I think I'm already on the blacklist or something. I can't borrow anymore. If you pay, it'll all be over, Steve said, extending his hand towards me. So, Kelly, give me $8,000. When I slapped his hand away, Steve rubbed his hand and glared at me angrily. There's no way I'm paying. It's entirely your fault for overspending on your shopping and resorting to loan sharks. Why can't you help me out when I'm asking like this? Is it because we're only half-blood related that you don't care about your brother? Stepchildren are really the worst, so unpleasant. I got into my car and started the engine. Steve tried to cling to me in desperation, but I knocked his hand away. You promised not to contact me for the rest of your life in exchange for monopolizing the inheritance. You break promises, beg for money. And on top of that, you're rude and foolish. I don't have a single penny for you. If you come again, I'll call the police. Steve repeatedly called out to me, Kelly, but I ignored him. I stepped on the accelerator, leaving him in the parking lot, and drove away. After that, Steve continued to come to the city hall, lingering until closing time and bothering people from various departments with his calls in the morning and evening. Thanks to this, he became one of the top problematic individuals at the city hall. As long as I was there, he was a nuisance. Since he didn't shout or cause a scene at the counter, it was difficult to report him. So it was quicker for me to disappear. Do you want Kelly? She's no longer at this city hall. What? Did she quit? So how much severance pay did she get? When Steve came to the counter as usual, he learned from the staff that I had quit and received the severance pay. And he frantically started looking for where I might be. However, as personal information such as addresses and contact details of staff members is protected, there was no way he could be told freely. Unable to find me, Steve wandered around suspiciously and was reported as a suspicious person here and there. Subsequently, he was unable to gather the money by the repayment deadline and is now repaying little by little each month with considerable late fees added. I heard this from a kid whom Steve had defaulted on. It seems that he is ultimately facing wage garnishment as he couldn't keep up with repayments to other companies. Now, he is forced to live modestly. A far cry from the arrogant brother who used to strut around. As for me, I didn't actually quit the city hall. The city where I work was formed by merging several towns, so the old town hall still functions as a branch office. I explained the situation to the personnel department and was transferred to a branch in the mountains until things settled down. Initially, I planned to return to my former department once my brother's issue was resolved, but now I find the work in this branch more fulfilling. The mountain area has fewer residents and is always short-staffed. Being closer to the residents here, I feel I am more helpful to them. When I say I have no family left, everyone treats me kindly. The sadness of losing both my father and mother never fully disappears. But at least I am relieved to be free from the complications of being labeled a legitimate child or a stepchild. My name is Erica Smith. I am a 35-year-old office worker. Dylan and I got married after 5 years of being together. Although it is common to hold a wedding ceremony before registering the marriage, due to various scheduling conflicts, our registration happened before the ceremony. We had been planning and looking forward to our wedding ceremony for a long time. However, no one thought that the wedding day would be the beginning of a drama. On the day of the wedding, when Dylan and I had our first look, he was sweating profusely, which worried me. I had never seen him sweat so much before. His makeup was coming off due to the excessive sweat, and even the staff was concerned. However, Dylan insisted he was fine, so we proceeded with the ceremony. I walked down the aisle with my father, and the ceremony went on for a while. Just as the vow ceremony was about to start, my heart was pounding. But this was indeed the opening act of a drama. All we had left to say was "I do," but then, "Wait a minute," shouted my sister as she entered the wedding venue. I was stunned for a moment, but my sister was smiling as she approached us. While I was distracted by my sister, I felt a shock from behind. Turning around, I saw Dylan laughing and saying, "The bride isn't you." Then, as my sister stepped onto the stage, she said, "Isn't this a wonderful surprise?" The plan was a huge success. I love the look on Big Sister's face. They both laughed together. What were they thinking? Of course, I was shocked, and so were my parents and Dylan's parents. However, the words I uttered surprised Dylan and my sister, Lucy. "So, I should just give up my place, right?" "What? Why? Why?" "Because you want me to give it up, right?" "Yes, but why are you agreeing so easily?" "Should I have resisted?" "It would have just wasted our energy, right?" "But it's a wedding? You prepared for it, didn't you?" No. You're the one who ruined it." "Why are you so surprised?" "Well, let's move on since Big Sister says it's okay. There are guests here, and both my parents and Dylan's parents are here, so it's killing 2 birds with 1 stone. But I don't like having 2 people in dresses, so Big Sister, please leave." "Right. I certainly can't participate in this wedding." As we were talking, the wedding staff intervened. Of course, a wedding with the irrelevant sister and Dylan couldn't proceed, so it was disbanded. We handed out something to the attendees and refunded their gifts before sending them home. My parents and Dylan's parents gathered to discuss the situation. Everyone seemed concerned about me, but because I seemed calmer than they expected, they didn't understand the situation. Why is Big Sister so quick to understand? Quick to understand? Really? Yes. It's strange. I thought I would make Big Sister suffer more. It's definitely strange. What do you want me to do? You wanted to steal the wedding, right? Then, aren't you glad you could steal it? Yes, but it's boring if it's this easy. Really, Erica? Did you know something? Know something? If you want to know, I can tell you. I knew this would happen. I was only surprised by their outrageous actions, but I wasn't shocked that they had such a relationship. Lucy and I are not actually blood-related sisters. She is the daughter of my father's second wife, whom I first met when I was in elementary school. My stepmother was a very kind person who always cherished me no matter the situation. I wanted to get along with Lucy and actively tried to talk to her, but she didn't reciprocate much. However, I intended to interact with her as a sister. Nevertheless, Lucy always seemed overwhelmed by feelings of envy. She compared everything to me and wanted everything I had. I could give her things, but when it came to friends or lovers, I definitely refused. Then she would cling to our parents, saying, "Mom, big sister won't give me her friends. Big sister won't give me her boyfriend." Of course, even my parents said to her, "That's difficult, Lucy. Friends and lovers are close with Erica because they want to be, not because they can be transferred to you, Lucy. Don't you have your own friends?" "I don't have friends, so I want sisters." And she even wanted my older friends and boyfriend. Lucy's selfishness was troubling for both my parents and me. I grew so tired of that lifestyle that, when I graduated from high school, I started living on my own. I made sure not to tell Lucy where I lived because I didn't want to have any contact with her. I occasionally met with my parents, but my university life was busy, and I was focused on obtaining my qualifications, so living alone was truly a blessing. It would have been terrifying to think of such a challenging life with Lucy around. Then I got a job at an accounting firm. The firm is family-run and has a very homey atmosphere. Family-run businesses are often said to be difficult to work in, but it was a kind and wonderful environment. 7 years after I started working, Dylan joined the company. It seems he had been working at another accounting firm but decided to join his family's firm when he turned 30. Dylan fell in love with me at first sight and actively pursued me. He was kind and considerate, so I gradually became attracted to him, and we started dating. The company's owners were happy about our relationship. In fact, they had been encouraging me to date him from the moment Dylan was hired. So, we got married after 5 years, and that was the start of our married life. But Dylan's behavior became strange when we went to my family home to announce our marriage. Before going to greet my family, I had told them not to invite Lucy, but somehow she was there, and when Lucy saw Dylan's appearance, she scoffed but became interested when she heard about his profession. "Oh, are you the next president?" "Yes, our accounting firm incorporated 5 years ago, so that makes me the president." "Wow. So big sister is going to be a president's wife? Isn't that a bit unfair?" "That's so sneaky." No. It's not about being sneaky or anything. It's not a very large accounting firm, so I'll continue working, and it's nothing to envy. Then give Dylan to me. Do you understand what you're saying? We are engaged, so I can't just hand him over, okay? What? Really? That's so troublesome. It's not about being troublesome. But Dylan, you've never seemed very popular before. What about a woman like me? I have more charm and appeal than big sister. We don't really look alike, do we? That's right. We're not blood related. Right. Erica seems like a beautiful elder sister, but Lucy, you seem cute and like someone I'd want to protect. Oh no. Dylan, saying I'm cute in front of big sister. You love me, don't you? Well. When I showed signs of disgust, my parents sensed it and took Lucy away from Dylan, returning her to us. After that, Dylan's behavior became odd. I work in accounting, and I noticed that Dylan started producing receipts from high-end bars, Italian, and French restaurants. Strange. Certainly, Dylan said maintaining relationships with clients was important, and he would go to entertain with my father-in-law, sometimes alone. But those outings were usually for golf or at pubs, not Italian or French restaurants, let alone bars. Moreover, his stays increased, and the lodging costs were always over $300. I consulted my in-laws, and they spoke with Dylan, who managed to make excuses and slipped through their scrutiny. Still, it was odd. It hadn't happened before, and suddenly after we went to greet my family. I thought I should be suspicious, but I worried it would be bothersome during his busy work times. I endured thinking that. One day, as the office computers were being serviced, I noticed Dylan's computer received a message. I only saw the sender and the first line, but it was from Lucy. The message read, "Does big sister realize?" Curiosity got the better of me. I decided not to send Dylan's computer for maintenance but got him a new one, and I checked his messages when he wasn't around. The content was truly dreadful. Thanks for giving me your contact. I've been smitten by your cuteness since I saw you at the greeting. Thanks for contacting. I'm happy to hear from you. I fell for Dylan at first sight. I'd be happy to have a physical relationship. I was shocked. At some point during the marriage greeting, he must have given her his contact. I was there all the time, but when? Though I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment, it was clear they were involved. As I read the messages, I saw unbearable lovey-dovey emails and photos they sent each other, which were quite disgusting. However, Lucy was telling outrageous lies. Big sister has been harassing me since she remarried. She stole my lovers and lied to my friends to cut off my relationships. She also speaks ill of me to our parents. I was told I couldn't marry until Big Sister did. So when Dylan said he was marrying me, I thought I could finally find someone, but it turned out to be Dylan. For the first time, I wanted to steal something from Big Sister. What is she talking about? Lucy was blaming me for everything she had done herself. But Dylan believed her, saying, I want to marry Lucy. I never thought Erica was such a person. But seeing how well she gets along with my parents, I can believe it. Let's get back at her. First, let's meet at the hotel today and talk. Just talk? Of course, we'll have to have a physical discussion. But after that, let's discuss in bed. A plan to push her into the abyss. Seeing this, they planned to ruin me. I felt nauseated from reading too much of Dylan and Lucy's messages. Yet, despite talking about such things, Dylan still sought physical relations with me. I hadn't realized until I saw those messages, but the night he was with Lucy, he was also with me. Truly disgusting. After seeing that, I could no longer face Dylan, and whenever he was at home, I would immediately go to my bedroom. Of course, he reported this to Lucy. That old hag is avoiding me. I can see the wedding preparations are going smoothly on the app. How about Lucy appears at the vow part of the ceremony and steals the spotlight? We talked at the hotel about locking her in a closet before the wedding, but that's not realistic. Indeed. And that plan would be dramatic, right? They were excited about it. So I decided to take revenge too. That's why I wasn't surprised by them at the wedding. I was just shocked by their indecent behavior. My parents said Lucy couldn't attend the wedding because she had a cold, her throat hurt so much she couldn't speak, and she might have an infectious disease. Well, I knew that too because it was all in the messages. So I knew she wouldn't be there. And then the moment of the vows came, and Lucy appeared. And now here we are. I'll give you what you want. I'll take it without you saying, but what's the point? Knowing that, it's just boring. As we were talking, my father-in-law erupted in anger. What is the meaning of this? Who is this woman ruining the wedding? At that, Lucy started speaking through tears. I am Erica's sister, Lucy. Actually, my sister is a terrible person, planning to take over the accounting firm. So I told Dylan, and our love ignited. Dylan also said that I am cuter, and that his parents love me more than they do such a despicable person. That's why it ended up like this. That's right. Dad, Mom. Erica is a liar and a horrible person. That's right. I am the horrible one, am I? Could you please look at the paper I distributed earlier? As I said that, I showed everyone the paper I had given out. It contained evidence of their affair and a letter from a lawyer regarding compensation. The evidence included all their message exchanges and embarrassing photos which shocked them both. What? What is this? Why do you have this? I borrowed it from Dylan's computer. Did I ever do anything like what this message to Lucy suggests? Hey, Mom. Dad. When I asked this, they said, no. If anything, it was always Lucy who was saying I want that too and taking lovers away from Erica. So, this is all a lie. Taking over the accounting firm? You both know that's impossible, right? Yes. We trust Erica enough that even if she took over, it would be fine. What is that supposed to mean? Erica, I am really sorry. As everyone began to side with me. Why is it always big sister? Big sister has everything I don't, it's not fair. Friends too. Boyfriends too. Everyone just loves big sister. I'm cuter. That's not fair. It's wrong. And why does mom always side with her? She's my mom, right? Why would she side with a sister who's not even related by blood? Why was I attracted to such a woman? She's just a woman who's been making trouble for Erica. Dylan, you just got carried away, didn't you? You have little experience with love, so you were thrilled to be flirted with by a pretty girl like Lucy, but I'm disappointed. Lucy has always been with many men, she knows how to handle them. Huh? That's not true. I was always. That doesn't make any sense, does it? As we were talking, someone in charge of the venue came and said, "What a problem you've caused in such a festive place. We will charge you for the inconvenience and all the costs of the ceremony." And we were driven out. Of course, that person came to my dressing room and told me they understood I was not at fault, which was reassuring. They even offered me the cake that was supposed to be served for dessert. It might have been a gesture of consolation, but I genuinely enjoyed the deliciousness of that cake because I knew everything in advance. There was no shock at all. Feeling refreshed, I left the venue where my parents were waiting for me. Maybe because I had been tense up until then, I started crying. I kept telling myself I wasn't shocked, but it seems a deep wound had formed in my heart. My parents took me home where I rested a bit, and eventually, I felt calm and returned to my usual confident self. Then, I received a message from my husband and shortly after from my sister as well. Both messages were similar, saying, "You got us in trouble with our parents. Pay us compensation." And, "It's your fault our family relations are messed up. We will claim compensation." They really are alike. I was disgusted. Later, my in-laws contacted me and told me I could take a week off from work, which I gratefully accepted. I thanked them and took a week off work, put away my smartphone, and went on an overseas trip. When I returned and turned on my smartphone, there were a monstrous number of messages from Dylan. I ignored them and visited my in-laws first. "I'm really sorry about this time. Dylan has been fired, so we'd like you to continue working as before." They told me, and I decided to keep working for a while. After speaking with my in-laws, I considered replying to Dylan. As soon as I sent a message, he called within 2 seconds. "Why haven't you been reachable? I had something I wanted to tell you." "What?" "My talk is only about compensation. You don't need to worry about that." "Huh? What do you mean?" "We're not getting divorced." "What? I don't understand." "We are getting divorced. I don't know what authority you think you have to say otherwise, but we are getting divorced." "Why?" "I got fired." "How can the next president get fired?" "Besides, Dad, even though the office itself is small, has power, and he seems to be advising people not to hire me, I can't even get interviews. That's unbearable, isn't it? Dating Lucy meant I could splurge with receipts I made, but now that it's just my money, I'll be bankrupt in 2 months. I barely have any savings left, what am I supposed to do? I can't even pay the compensation. And on top of that, Lucy is pregnant. Now she just lounges around, not working. Using her pregnancy as an excuse, she keeps demanding things, wanting only the best for baby products, she's so demanding. I'm stressed out. One reason I want to get back with you is not wanting to pay compensation, but I also want to get away from Lucy. You're independent, which is good, but Lucy isn't. That's what makes it really hard. You see, my parents approve of you because you really have your act together. I realized how important it is to be apart only after leaving. Separation is really important, isn't it? What are you even saying alone? I am moving forward with the divorce, and regardless of your family situation, we will divorce and you and Lucy will pay the compensation and the wedding cancellation fees. Also, my dress got torn when you pushed me. That was a rental, so you'll be billed for that too. What the heck? That's not fair. Why do I have to suffer like this? Aren't you partly to blame? You did things that made Lucy resent you. That's not true. Lucy resents anyone. Lucy will probably get mad saying you're going out while she's stuck at home pregnant. That's what this is about. No matter what, she always has to be perfect, everyone has to want her, and she's never satisfied unless she's the only happy one. Did you guys even register your marriage? No. She just said we should because she's pregnant. Could that pregnancy be a lie? What? Did you check? Did you go to the doctor with her? No. She didn't want to go together. Then I can't believe it. You should suggest going to the doctor together next time. Don't scare me like that. Anyway, make sure to take care of the compensation and the venue fees. With that, I hung up the phone. And 3 days later, Lucy called. Big sister, you said something unnecessary to Dylan, didn't you? I didn't say anything. You said I'm not pregnant. Was that true? Yes. I had to lie about that much or he wouldn't register our marriage because he has no intention of marrying me. That's really not okay, is it? But I had to do that or I couldn't get him. Why are you so fixated on Dylan? He's not my husband anymore, and he's not a president, right? Why when he has no money? Because Dylan is the only one who pays attention to me. Everyone I was involved with was older, and they all got scared of marriage or having an affair. Dylan was the only one who cared for me. That's why I don't want to let go of him. Wow. Well, I think lying is bad. What happened to you two? Dylan got angry and left. He said he never wants to see my face again. It would be refreshing not to see such an ugly face, but this time it's different. My mom and dad abandoned me too, now I'm all alone. If that's the case, even such an ugly person is a wonderful boyfriend to me, a tool to fulfill my wishes. I can't believe someone who calls people tools can be happy. Shut up. Big sister, you're always like this. Always wielding your correct arguments. People can't live in such correctness. I know that, but you can't live a crooked life without consequences. The world isn't that easy. You, not only for compensation, but who was that in the dress at the wedding? Don't you know? Isn't it your second dress? No. I didn't change into a white dress. I chose a blue dress. You were the one in white. It turns out the dress was actually someone's personal property, not a rental, and now there's a major issue because it's considered stolen. Moreover, the wedding had to be cancelled because there was no dress, and now the person responsible is being billed for the cancellation fee. What? The perpetrator? Yes, it's a crime. You might even be arrested soon. Arrested? That's ridiculous. And it's no longer in my possession, so I can't be considered the criminal. What do you mean it's not with you? Because I had no money, I had to sell it. It sold for quite a bit, so now all I have is cash, not the dress. Ah, you really did it this time. You're going to be caught by the police. I always knew you were foolish, but this is just. I'm at a loss for words. What do you mean? Why? The person who bought it will be arrested, right? The buyer wouldn't know the situation. I don't care about that. That might be true, but... Well, you better get ready to be arrested. You shouldn't steal other people's things. Mom and Dad always taught us that, but it seems you never listened. I'm so disappointed. Come on, big sister. Help me. I don't want to get arrested. I don't know. You're just facing the consequences of your actions. Reflect on this and start living a good life. Say you did it, big sister. It's unfair that only you get compensation. You might as well continue to think everyone else is unfair. When you end up truly alone and can't blame anyone else, you'll face even more hardships, but that's your own doing. Goodbye. After that, I ignored numerous calls from Dylan and Lucy. Then, while watching TV, news broke that a dress thief had been caught. It was Lucy. But during the news, her statement was broadcast. Big Sister is to blame. It's all Big Sister's fault. Although other names were not mentioned, there were comments that must have been about Dylan, still blaming others. I was astonished that she was still blaming others. Lucy, with no money, would be in police custody for a while. Dylan tried to come to my parents' house and even stormed into the accounting firm run by my in-laws, attempting to mend our relationship, but everyone rejected him. No one was willing to accept him. Despite Dylan repeatedly asking for a chance to talk, it was clear he just didn't want to pay the compensation, so I never agreed to meet. I left my in-laws' accounting firm and am now working as an accountant at a company in a different region. My in-laws had always wanted me to keep working with them, but working with the family of the man I divorced was too much, and frankly, I hated the idea of Dylan showing up. So when this incident prompted my parents to sell their apartment and move to the countryside, I took it as a good opportunity for us all to relocate together. It truly cut ties with Lucy. Having endured so much for Lucy's sake, our family finally feels free. From now on, we plan to use our time for our own happiness.